Marshall Peak, Chapter 5380, Total Victory. As such, it was natural for Blue Sky Theatre to be the second to destroy the Black Ink clan after their counterparts in the Great Evolution Theatre. It was also understandable that those from Azure Void Pass and Wind and Cloud Pass could also pull off similar feats immediately after them. When the Great Evolution Army was founded some 300 years ago, they initially departed from these two great passes. The Great Evolution Army had participated in the wars against the Black Ink clan in those theaters before they set out towards Great Evolution Pass. At that time, there were respectively 60,000 soldiers and more than 200 8th Order masters in those two great passes. During those wars, they managed to deal severe damage to the Black Ink clan forces and kill a large number of territory lords. It could be said that the Black Ink clan in the Azure Void Theatre and Wind and Cloud Theatre had suffered immense losses at that time, which laid the foundation for their victory today. More and more good news arrived from the other great passes, and of course, Great Evolution Pass wasn't the only receiver of such good news. The great passes would spread the news to other places upon receiving the information. After Great Evolution Pass won their war a while back, they immediately sent the news to other great passes in the vicinity so that they could boost the human soldiers' morale. That way, the human soldiers in the different theaters would be increasingly assertive. 10 days after the dust settled in Great Evolution Theater, over 10 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters from Great Evolution Pass were deployed to other theaters where the humans were in deadlocks with the enemies to provide assistance. It wasn't smooth sailing for all the theaters like in the Great Evolution Theater. In some of the theaters, the Black Ink clan had ample heritage, so it wasn't easy for the humans to win the war. With that said, those leading the armies had naturally made some arrangements for these theaters. They didn't have to fight with the Black Ink clan head-on, they just had to deal with them with patience and stall for time. When victory was obtained in the other theaters, there would be powerful masters who could be sent as reinforcements. For example, those in Great Evolution Theatre had won their war fairly early on, so they were able to send aid to those theaters that were caught in stalemates. A dozen or so 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters was a force to be reckoned with. Moreover, many 7th Order Masters were carried along inside their small universes. Although only a dozen or so 8th Order Masters were deployed from the Great Evolution Theatre, they were accompanied by some 200 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters. Furthermore, this was just the support from Great Evolution Pass. The other great passes from different victorious theaters were able to help out as well. When the wars were settled in those theaters, even more human masters would be free to render assistance in the theaters where wars were still ongoing. This kind of support would only increase like a rolling snowball. How was the Black Ink clan supposed to fend off the humans under such circumstances? As long as there were 2 or 3 great passes that could send reinforcements, any theater could easily break the stalemate they found themselves in. This kind of large-scale support operation had never been seen before. At the very least, not before Yang Kai's arrival at the Black Ink battlefield. The great passes were far away from each other, so even though they were connected by space arrays, it was expensive to transfer humans around. Given the scarcity of resources, they couldn't afford to do so. Furthermore, the more powerful a person was, the more expensive it was to send him or her to another great pass through the space array. In the past, even if they just wanted to send over 10 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters to the nearest great pass, all the reserve resources from a great pass would be used up. Without any resources left, how were the humans supposed to cultivate? How would they treat their wounds if they were injured? How would they repair the damaged warships? Therefore, even though the humans had a method to send assistance to other theaters, they were unable to do so due to the lack of resources. But it was different now, for the great passes had all accumulated a massive amount of resources over the past few centuries. Moreover, they had acquired a lot of resources after conquering the royal cities. Therefore, they had sufficient resources to transfer people around freely. The humans' plan was that they would support their neighbors whenever they could. In simple terms, they would only try to support the great passes nearest to them. That was because the longer the distance was, the more resources would be required to power the hyperspace arrays. Although the humans were not short on resources, it was not like they could easily squander them all away either. As such, Great Evolution Pass only needed to send out a small number of people because the neighboring Azure Void Pass and Wind and Cloud Pass had mostly destroyed the enemies, so help wasn't really needed. The Great Passes nearest to the theaters where the humans were in deadlocks with the enemies spared no effort to lend their counterparts a hand. As long as an 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Master was still able to fight, they would be redeployed as soon as possible. Even some of the old ancestors headed to different theaters to help out. It was no different from a nightmare to the Black Ink clan. They were initially able to hold back the humans and even counterattack in some theaters, but with the sudden influx of 8th Order and 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, the situation instantly became treacherous. When the 9th Order Old Ancestors began appearing in other theaters, the deadlocks instantly turned into massacres where the Black Ink clansmen were slaughtered. On the other hand, Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao remained in Great Evolution Pass. The information Yang Kai had discovered in the Black Ink nest space made her feel a little uneasy, so she didn't dare to leave this place at this point. She was worried that something terrible would happen in the Great Evolution Theater if she wasn't around. Furthermore, she had been forced to overexert herself in order to kill Mo Jiao as quickly as possible, so she had suffered some serious injuries as well. This went to show that it wasn't easy to kill a royal lord no matter the condition they were in. Mo Jiao had never managed to heal from his wounds over the years while Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao was at peak strength, but it still took her a great deal of effort to swiftly kill the enemy. It was expected that it was even harder for the other old ancestors in the theaters where the royal lords were perfectly healthy. Yang Kai didn't leave the Great Evolution Theater either. It wasn't that he wasn't willing to lend a hand, but rather he couldn't. When they came up with a list of people that would be sent to other theaters, Yang Kai ranked first among the 7th Order Masters because he was far more powerful than those in the same order and was even able to fight with territory lords after transforming into an ancient dragon. No one would neglect him. If he was sent to another theater, he would prove to be just as useful as an 8th Order Master. However, when Xiong Shan tried to keep him inside his small universe, he realized he was unable to do so. When he tried to forcefully do so, he realized that his small universe was on the brink of bursting. It didn't take long to figure out that because Yang Kai was so much more powerful than others in the same order, with a small universe that was significantly bigger and heavier than an ordinary 7th Order Master's, trying to carry him inside another's small universe just wasn't feasible. Moreover, the damage to Yang Kai's soul hadn't healed, and Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao also needed him to remain so that he could help with her recuperation. The wars in the other theaters were still raging, while it was peaceful in Great Evolution Pass. The injured could finally get some rest and recuperate. Yang Kai had spread out his small universe to help with Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao's recuperation while he tended to his own injuries. Good news still kept coming from other Great Passes and more soldiers headed out to help out. The deadlocks in the theaters were resolved and the advantage the humans had accumulated continued to increase with time. The 7th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters responsible for guarding the space array meticulously informed everyone about the good news. Initially, everyone was excited upon hearing each piece of good news, but as time passed, it became almost routine. They had been preparing for centuries to deliver a fatal blow to the enemy, so it shouldn't surprise them that they eventually won the war. Along with a certain piece of good news, another piece of information was delivered. A 7th Order Master passed it to Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao without disclosing it to everyone. Yang Kai didn't ask her about it, nor did she intend to tell him. He believed that the information contained the number of casualties on the humans' side. If they talked about Great Evolution Theater alone, the casualty rate was quite shocking. Before the Crusade, there were some 40,000 soldiers and over 78th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters in the Great Evolution Army. But now, Yang Kai could only detect the auras of about 30,000 soldiers and fewer than 48th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters. If he included the dozen or so 8th Order Masters who had left to help other Great Passes, that was still only about 50. Where were the rest? After the war, Yang Kai had scanned the battlefield and helped retrieve a number of corpses, so he knew the answer. It could be said that the losses that the Great Evolution Army had suffered this time were just as great as what they had experienced 200 years ago. When the Great Evolution Army was founded, there were 60,000 soldiers and 128th Order Division commanders. In just 300 to 400 years, half of them had perished in battle. Even the Great Evolution Army, which had the finest arms and armaments as well as a huge advantage over the enemy, suffered such tremendous losses. The situations in other theaters could only be worse. More and more good news came from the other theaters. The support system they had for each other proved to be useful. 2 months later, there came a moment when a familiar voice reverberated across the entire Great Evolution Pass again. The humans have won the war in the Great Battle Theater. The Royal Lord has fallen and all the Black Ink clan soldiers were killed. As he ran around the Great Pass, he loudly announced this piece of good news to everyone. Everyone in Great Evolution Pass started cheering again. All of them danced excitedly as howls of joy spread across the entire place. In the small universe, Yang Kai let out a breath. Even though he had already expected this day to come, he still couldn't stop his ecstasy from rising within him when he heard about this particular piece of good news. The reason these soldiers, who had been silent for quite a while, became excited again was that the Great Battle Theater was the last place where the humans were still fighting. In the past 2 months, they had received good news from over 105 theaters, with the latest report coming from the Luosheng Theater 3 days ago. 3 days later, good news from the Great Battle Theater arrived. At this point, the humans had gained total victory on the Black Ink battlefield as they had occupied all the theaters. Furthermore, according to the good news, all the Black Ink clansmen had been wiped out. It was a very rare statement as only 3 out of over 100 reports had used such wording. It wasn't easy to wipe out all the Black Ink clansmen in a given theater. Even Great Evolution Pass was unable to achieve this. The Great Battle Theater was the last place where the humans managed to achieve it. It certainly had something to do with the fact that they had a lot of reinforcements from the other theaters. There was no way the Black Ink clan could fend off hundreds of 8th Order and thousands of 7th Order Open Masters who arrived at the battlefield from different Great Passes. Recalling something, Yang Kai turned to look at Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao and asked, "Old Ancestor, you told me before that there were 2 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters and 2 Royal Lords in the Great Battle Theater." Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao nodded. It seems that one of them escaped. Only one Royal Lord was mentioned in the good news, so it was apparent that the other one had run away. Doing a quick count, aside from the ones he had seen inside the Black Ink nest space, Yang Kai reckoned that about 50 to 60 Royal Lords had fled. That was indeed a worrying number, for they were not feudal lords or territory lords. If those Royal Lords gathered together, no Great Pass would be a match for them. In the past, they were in charge of their royal cities where they had many subordinates and their own Black Ink nests to worry about, so they wouldn't easily leave. In this way, the human old ancestors were able to pin them down. But now, their royal cities had been shattered, their armies killed, and their Black Ink nests destroyed. Even though they appeared to be in a sorry state, they had actually broken free from their restraints. Now, they were able to move around freely. Yang Kai couldn't help but feel worried. Those surviving royal lords would surely prove to be a threat to the human race in the future. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5381, Borrowing the Soul-Warming Lotus. Just when he was worrying about this, Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao suddenly said, "The news from theaters everywhere show that there is only one royal city in each theater, and only one high-rank Black Ink nest in each royal city." Yang Kai listened with doubts as his eyes narrowed and asked, "No exceptions?" The old ancestor shook her head and replied, "No exceptions. Moreover, there are no extra royal lords that we have not accounted for participating in all the theaters." Yang Kai was silent and sighed. That's not necessarily good news. Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao did not say anything, but lowered her eyes and pondered. When Yang Kai reported what he found in the Black Ink nest space, Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao asked Great Evolution Pass to send another message to the other Great Passes, telling the other old ancestors to be on the lookout for a possible surprise attack. By now, every theater had been pacified. The Black Ink clan was badly beaten with many killed and wounded. More than half of the royal lords were killed, and no additional royal lords participated in the battle. All the royal lords who participated in this battle were those who had been fighting with the 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters in their theater already, and there were no unfamiliar faces. It was fortunate that there were no interferences on the battlefield, otherwise, there was no way that the human race army could be victorious in such a short time. The 20 or so royal lords Yang Kai saw were undoubtedly real as well, yet, they did not hide in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to sneak up on the old ancestors. In the royal city of each theatre, there was only one high-rank black ink nest, even in the great battle theatre. There were 2 royal lords there, and since there are 2 royal lords, there should be 2 high-rank black ink nest, but there was only one. It seemed that the 2 royal lords shared a high-rank black ink nest, or one of the royal lords did not have his own black ink nest. This was indeed not good news for the humans. There were exactly as many theatres as there were high-rank black ink nest. But how many divine senses did Yang Kai see in the black ink nest space at that time? 120 to 130. There should be as many high-rank black ink nests as there were souls in that space. This meant that the 20 royal lords who were watching from the sidelines were not involved in the war at all, and their black ink nests remained undiscovered by the humans. Where could they be hiding? Could the previous speculation about the mother nest be true? Were they really the mother nest's guards? Then, where was the mother nest? Yang Kai suddenly had a bad feeling that the war between the 2 races was far from over. Other than that, the dozens of royal lords that escaped from the major theatres were an immediate problem. Now that it was confirmed that there were at least 20 more royal lords and corresponding high-rank black ink nests that were not discovered, these issues needed to be resolved. Yang Kai couldn't help feeling vexed. He had thought that after this great battle, the black ink battlefield would be completely pacified, but now this unforeseen situation had popped up. This black ink clan situation was more complicated than anyone had expected. Yang Kai suddenly remembered the phrase black ink eternal that Mo Jiao shouted before he died. As a royal lord, Mo Jiao should have known the secrets of the black ink clan. He naturally knew that even if the black ink clan of all the other theatres fell, the black ink clan would not be easily defeated. At that time, Yang Kai had scoffed at him. The cries of a defeated enemy were laughable, especially when they were about never being defeated. However, now it seemed that everyone had underestimated the black ink clan, including the old ancestors. Although there were still unseen problems, it was a fact that the black ink clan were defeated in the major theatres. When the news of the victories in all the other theatres was received, the entire Great Evolution Pass fell into a celebratory mood. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao left to discuss important matters with the army commanders, while Yang Kai kept his small universe and recuperated in silence. A few days later, Yang Kai felt clear space principal fluctuations coming from the grand hall where the space array was located, followed by Xiong Shan's aura. The reinforcements deployed by Great Evolution Pass were led by Xiong Shan, who brought about a dozen 8th Order, a few hundred 7th Order masters to support other great passes. They had finally returned. Xiong Shan departed with more than 10 8th Order masters, but only returned with 7. Those 8th Order division commanders who did not return would probably never return. This made Yang Kai angry as so many people had died, yet the Black Ink clan endured. When would this war finally be resolved? This also made him realize that he was still too small and weak. He thought that after this battle he could return to the 3,000 worlds and the star boundary. That he could spend his days with his parents, return to his beautiful wives, frolic in the rivers and gaze up at the stars. Now, it seemed that he had to quickly break through to the 8th Order in preparation for another war. He had a vague sense of urgency in his heart, like the entire human race was facing a huge challenge ahead. Unless he became an 8th Order master, he might not be able to protect himself. However, cultivation in the open heaven realm was basically a matter of accumulation over time, one that could not simply be skipped over. Yang Kai's small universe reared countless living beings and had a world tree clone helping maintain and strengthen it. Time even flowed faster in his small universe, allowing his cultivation speed to be much faster than any others. Still, it was not that easy to break through to the 8th Order open heaven realm for him. In the following days, Yang Kai did not engage in the celebrations. Instead, he was madly refining various cultivation materials so that he could enhance the heritage of his small universe. All of Dawn was inspired by him and did not waste any time, all of them entering retreat. Half a month later, several figures flew out of Great Evolution Pass, followed by a voice in Yang Kai's ears, "Follow me." Yang Kai opened his eyes, looked up, and flew off without saying a word. With a few movements, he had caught up with the ones ahead of him. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao was among them, along with the 4 army commanders. With such a lineup, it appeared that something big was about to happen. Yang Kai braced himself, approached Xiong Shan, and asked, "Sir, what is our plan?" Xiong Shan did not hide anything from him as he said, "To find out what's going on with the Black Ink clan. Since old ancestor Xiao Xiao wanted him to follow them, there was no need to hide what they were going to do." Yang Kai instantly understood, "We're going into the Black Ink nest space?" They were flying towards the royal city. If they were going to find out what was going on with the Black Ink clan, they had to use the high-rank Black Ink nest to enter its Black Ink nest space. Xiong Shan nodded. Yang Kai immediately looked at the old ancestor and said, "Old ancestor, this junior would like to serve as the vanguard." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao glanced at him briefly and shook her head. "No, you are too weak." Yang Kai felt as if his heart had been pierced. However, when he thought about it, there were 6 of them. A 9th order old ancestor, 4 peak 8th orders master, and him, a 7th order junior. Indeed, he was too weak. You were lucky to escape last time. If there are really 20 royal lords lying in wait inside that Black Ink nest space as you said, you won't be coming back if you enter again this time. Yang Kai could not refute her. Although his soul was as strong as any 8th order master's, there was still an enormous gap between him and a royal lord. Even with the soul-warming lotus protection, he may not be able to resist the combined attack of several royal lords. Moreover, even if he could block such attacks, once the Black Ink nest space was completely closed like the last time, he would also be trapped inside, unable to get out. Last time, Yang Kai was trapped in the high-rank Black Ink nest space for years in order to help Great Evolution Pass fully control their seized mid-rank Black Ink nest. However, he relied on his soul-rending thorns to kill or cripple several territory lords, forcing them to open the Black Ink nest space. If he was trapped this time, what would he use to fight with the royal lords? "I asked you to come this time so I could borrow your soul-warming lotus." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao explained, "No one knows what is going on in that Black Ink nest space, so we have to take precautions." Hearing this, Yang Kai frowned. "Old ancestor, last time I was there, I saw some 20 royal lords inside. It is not safe for you to enter alone, even with the soul-warming lotus." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao smiled and said, "I will not be entering alone." Yang Kai was amazed and asked, "Others are going with you?" Suddenly, Yang Kai thought of something and asked, "With the old ancestors from the other theaters?" Old ancestor Xiao Xiao nodded and said, "Since you sent out that warning that day, the human race naturally became concerned. The other theaters all searched for the location of the other high-rank Black Ink nest, but so far they've yet to discover anything. At the same time, instead of outright destroying them, orders were passed down to preserve as many high-rank Black Ink nests as possible in the other theaters. Although we didn't manage to capture many, there are still more than 20. It was not an easy task to keep a high-rank Black Ink nest intact during the crusade. In fact, it was more of a coincidence that the high-rank Black Ink nest in Great Evolution Theater survived than anything else. Yang Kai had not hesitated or held back when he attacked the Royal Lord Black Ink nest. At that time, he just wanted to destroy it so that Mo Jiao would have no way to borrow strength from it. He wanted to help old ancestor Xiao Xiao gain a decisive advantage. As a result, the Black Ink nest collapsed and Mo Jiao could not draw Black Ink strength from it, causing his combat strength to be greatly reduced. However, the Black Ink nest itself was not completely destroyed. If the other theaters wanted to preserve these Black Ink nests though, they would have to pay a much higher price. With over 100 theaters, it was not easy to leave more than 20 high-rank Black Ink nests behind. However, this meant that more than 20 old ancestors could join hands to explore the Black Ink nest space. If those royal lords really ambushed them, the old ancestors need not be afraid of them. Of course, no one could say if those 20 royal lords were still in the Black Ink nest space at this moment, so the old ancestors were just taking precautions. In line with that thinking, borrowing Yang Kai's soul-warming lotus would indeed provide another layer of safety. Yang Kai naturally did not refuse such a small request. The soul-warming lotus was a supreme treasure which ordinary cultivators would conceal at any cost for fear of its existence being exposed, leading to their death. However, This was the black ink battlefield, and Yang Kai would never be wary of old ancestor Xiao Xiao. It was impossible for her to hold the intention to harm him, thus, he did not hesitate to take it out. A 7-colored lotus suddenly emerged from the knowledge sea. The lotus looked ethereal and illusory, almost as if it was material and immaterial all at once. As soon as it appeared, a wondrous aura permeated from it, one that allowed everyone present to feel their soul being nourished. Even old ancestor Xiao Xiao felt the same, and she was in the 9th order open heaven realm where very, very few treasures could benefit her. Only innate supreme treasures like the soul-warming lotus were of some use to her. Without standing on ceremony, old ancestor Xiao Xiao accepted the soul-warming lotus into her body and refined it a little. At the same time, everyone arrived in front of the black ink nest, where several 8th order open heaven realm masters were standing guard in the shadows. When they saw the old ancestor arrive, they only verified her identity but did not show themselves. Following the passage opened by Yang Kai, the group of 6 soon arrived at the center of the black ink nest. Xiong Shan checked around and bellowed, "Assume your positions." Mi Jing Lun, Ou Yang Lai, Liu Zhiping quickly dispersed and blended in with the shadows. Xiong Shan remained on guard in the open, while Yang Kai simply observed. As a 7th order master, there was no other role for him to play here. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao searched for a place and sat down cross-legged, not interacting with the black ink nest, but just waiting patiently. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5382, Unprecedented Battle. There might be nothing in the black ink nest space, or they might be ambushed by more than 20 royal lords. Since the human race wanted to enter it to investigate the situation, they had to take appropriate precautions. If only 1 or 2 old ancestors entered it, then it would be difficult for them to defend against the potential dangers. Yang Kai was not sure how the old ancestors worked out the details, but when one's cultivation had reached their realm, such trivial matters were naturally not difficult for them. Yang Kai and Xiong Shan waited silently on the side. It was only after half an hour or so that old ancestor Xiao Xiao suddenly opened her eyes. The time had arrived. In the next moment, her small universe opened up and world force emerged and was swallowed by the black ink nest. Using her world force as a bridge, old ancestor Xiao Xiao mentally connected to the black ink nest and instantly entered the black ink nest space. At the same time, at the high-rank black ink nests in 21 other theaters, 21 other old ancestors did the same. In an instant, there were 22 more figures in the black ink nest space. The moment old ancestor Xiao Xiao's soul entered the black ink nest space, both Yang Kai and Xiong Shan's expressions changed as they gasped. This could not be helped as at that instant, both of them could not sense old ancestor Xiao Xiao's soul, as if it was completely annihilated. Xiong Shan immediately coldly snorted. The black ink clan was prepared. Yang Kai also realized immediately and remarked, "The black ink nest space has been sealed." The last time his soul avatar was sealed in the black ink nest space, he was in such a state where his physical body was still alive but it contained no soul. That frightened Ou Yang Lai, who was guarding him, as he thought something had happened to Yang Kai. While he was trapped in that black ink nest space, Yang Kai was totally unaware of what happened in the outside world. Now that he had seen what happened to old ancestor Xiao Xiao, he immediately understood it was similar to his situation at that time. Xiong Shan nodded solemnly. "Must be." Yang Kai's expression turned ugly. The old ancestor had just entered, and the black ink nest space had been closed off. With more than 20 surviving high-rank black ink nest, the black ink clan must have noticed and realized that the humans might use those high-rank black ink nest to make some moves. Since the black ink clan had already anticipated this, it must be dangerous for the old ancestors to enter the black ink nest space. However, they had to enter as there were too many uncertainties about the black ink clan. If the human race wanted to find out more about the black ink clan, they would have to take some risks. Of course, the old ancestors had already deliberated about this before they decided to go in. Otherwise, old ancestor Xiao Xiao would not have borrowed the soul-warming lotus from Yang Kai in preparation. Even though it was dangerous, they had to step forward. Only by entering the black ink nest space could they tear off the veil of mystery that hid the black ink clan. Yang Kai's brows furrowed. There was no way for others to help in this situation. The old ancestors had to rely on their own strength. Meanwhile, inside the black ink nest space, powerful soul avatars were revealed, 22 of them. Naturally, these were the Ninth Order Supreme Masters of the human race, and they revealed themselves almost at the same time. However, before the Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters could investigate the situation, a fierce wave of spiritual energy rushed in from all directions. Immediately after that, violent soul attacks blasted towards the old ancestors like a tidal wave. There was no fancy soul secret techniques, it was just a simple brute force attack, similar to what Yang Kai previous did to Che Kong. This was the simplest, most direct, and brutal kind of soul attack. In an instant, the old ancestors' soul avatars were enveloped by violent storms. Muffled grunts could be heard and several old ancestors' aura suddenly weakened. This is bad. Just by stepping into this place, several old ancestors' soul avatars were already injured. Soon, each of the old ancestors quickly summoned their defensive artifacts to guard their soul avatars. Soul-type artifacts were rare, and defensive soul-type artifacts were even rarer. Nonetheless, they were all old ancestors, and had lived more than long enough to have acquired some rare artifacts. In a flash, various forms of defensive artifacts blossomed with dazzling lights and enveloped the old ancestors' soul avatars. The soul attacks coming from all directions were instantly blocked, causing the light halos to ripple continuously. So many. Only now were the old ancestors able to check the situation here, but with one look, the old ancestors exclaimed, "There are too many." There were 50 royal lords gathered here. That was more than twice the number of human masters. There was a huge mistake in the intelligence report. Or maybe it was not a mistake, but what Yang Kai saw at that time was not all the hidden royal lords the Black Ink clan possess. This time, the Black Ink clan sent more royal lords to ambush the humans who entered to investigate the situation. None of the old ancestors were fools, so they immediately understood the situation. What's more, the 50 they saw today, was that all there were? Perhaps, but then again, perhaps not. Although they were taken by surprise, and some of their soul avatars were injured, the old ancestors did not panic. It could be said that before entering this place, everyone had already expected the worst. What they now saw confirmed their previous suspicions. The battle between the two races was far from over. The Black Ink clan still had a very powerful force lurking in the shadows. Although the humans had won every war in all the various theaters, that was only a surface victory. Having realized this, the purpose of entering this space had been achieved. 22 against 50, that was a huge difference in numbers. Additionally, this was the enemy's home turf. It was impossible to prevail in such a situation. Thus, in just a blink of an eye, someone shouted, "Retreat." The next moment, someone said, "We can't get out, the space here has been sealed." Another old ancestor roared, "Then we break through it." Even if this Black Ink nest space was the domain of the Black Ink clan's mother nest, there had to be a limit. When Yang Kai was trapped previously, it was only naturally that he couldn't get out because he was nowhere near strong enough to forcefully break through the sealed space. Now, however, this place had 22 human old ancestors. When unified, there was nothing in this world that could suppress and seal them. This was also the reason why the old ancestors wanted to act together. Yang Kai's last encounter in the Black Ink nest space made them wary. The Black Ink clan seemed to be able to control the opening and closing of the Black Ink nest space, which they had planned for. Not to mention, the 50 royal lords' soul attacks would also have a significant impact on this space. Perhaps there were more royal lords in the Black Ink clan, but even if there were, they likely did not dare to move, otherwise, this space may not be able to withstand the stress. The old ancestors were all veterans of countless battles, so although the situation here was unexpected, and there were twice as many enemies as allies, they quickly stabilized their formation and gathered in one place. With their sole defensive artifacts covering all sides and resisting attacks from all angles. Some old ancestors even used soul secret techniques to counterattack those royal lords. At the same time, streams of light flashed into existence. Naturally, it was the old ancestors summoning offensive artifacts, and each one of them was very powerful. More than 70 top masters were now fighting inside this Black Ink nest space, causing it to begin to tremble. Presumptuous. Some of the old ancestors coldly snorted. The black ink nest space was indeed powerful, able to seal the souls of 72 supreme masters at once. However, it was now clearly shaking from the clash, which meant that it indeed had a limit. If the space was still as stable as a rock under such circumstances, then it would be truly terrifying. If that was the case, then the old ancestors would have no hope of escaping. However, now that the space was shaking, the old ancestors saw an opportunity. Spiritual energies exploded as the attacks came out one after another. The soul defensive artifacts summoned by the old ancestors were extremely powerful, but they could not last long under such circumstances. The artifacts rapidly dimmed and began to shatter after just 10 breaths of time. Grunts sounded when their soul avatars were injured, but the situation was not that grave yet. With one less defensive artifact, the human defense became more precarious. When the second defensive artifact was about to be broken, old ancestor Xiao Xiao shouted, "Gather around me." As soon as she yelled, a 7-colored lotus flower suddenly emerged, which quickly expanded to hold all the Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters on inside its petals. Outside the lotus, a brilliant 7-colored halo of light converged to form a sturdy barrier, stopping all of Royal Lord's attacks. "Is this that brat's soul-warming lotus?" An old ancestor recognized the origin of the lotus and exclaimed, "A supreme treasures of the universe is indeed extraordinary." The defensive artifacts that they summoned could not withstand the barrage of attacks from the Royal Lords for long, but this soul-warming lotus protection was unwavering, which showed how extraordinary it was. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao shouted, "Enough nonsense. Hurry up and kill them." What situation were they in for them to be marveling at this lotus? They were all old ancestors, yet they were acting like bumpkins that had not seen and explored the world yet. The old ancestor who spoke smiled awkwardly. Suddenly, a mass of spiritual energy transformed into a fierce beast, leapt out of the lotus heart towards the opposite royal lord, and gave a huge bite. Although it was a quick burst, it managed to viciously tear into the royal lord's soul avatar before it dissipated. "Waste. I dare you to fight one-on-one," an old ancestor shouted with indignation. In a one-on-one fight, the old ancestors were not afraid of these royal lords. Although the might of their souls was basically the same, the old ancestors felt that they were still slightly stronger. The key point, however, was that these royal lords were far too limited in their usage of soul attacks, only able to wield their spiritual energy in a clumsy manner. With how they were attacking, a fair amount of the strength of their souls was simply being wasted. The old ancestors were different as they had all practiced and polished their secret techniques in thousands of life and death clashes. They all had several handy artifacts as well. Given what power they had, each old ancestor was able to display far more combat efficiency than any of their enemies. Thus, if they fought one-on-one, the old ancestors could certainly defeat these royal lords. However, under such circumstances, why would the royal lord pay attention to that old ancestor roaring at them? They had the absolute numerical advantage, so they would naturally use it. In this battle, the losing side had only one fate, death. With twice the numbers on their side and the geographical advantage, the royal lords were certain of their victory. Since their entry into this space, the humans were forced into the defensive, and could only counterattack occasionally with negligible effects. If old ancestor Xiao Xiao had not borrowed Yang Kai's soul-warming lotus, the situation would have been even worse. However, the soul-warming lotus was not all-powerful. The 7-colored light enveloping them was continuously weakened by the relentless impacts it faced, and once the protection of the soul-warming lotus was broken, then the humans would no longer have the power to protect themselves. Even so, this was a truly unprecedented battle in terms of scope, scale, and importance. The result of this battle would have a direct impact on the future of the entire human race. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5383, Royal Lords Falling. Don't hold back, it's time to go all out. An old ancestor roared furiously as his soul avatar suddenly expanded atop the soul-warming lotus, turning into a giant in the blink of an eye. The giant reached its hand out of the protection of the soul-warming lotus and was quickly cut to pieces by the soul attacks from the royal lords. However, it soon recondensed. The giant made a low roar like a wounded beast. His arm was torn apart, which meant his soul avatar was wounded. Furthermore, any damage to the arm of his soul avatar was also damage to his soul. He remained undaunted though and firmly grabbed a royal lord on the periphery. The royal lord went pale and was about to flee when suddenly a mysterious force shot out and caused him to freeze in place. Not only that, he also felt his soul avatar receiving a huge shock and he was overwhelmed by an indescribable pain. Inside the soul-warming lotus, an old ancestor's soul avatar surged with demon chi, an ominous aura pulsing from his as he smiled treacherously. Such obvious features could only come from Myriad Demons Heaven. In fact, this was the old ancestor of Myriad Demons Cave Heaven that young Kai had once met and studied the two core eye secret techniques under for a time. The left eye of the Myriad Demons Pass old ancestor turned into a golden vertical slit that radiated an imposing aura as it reflected the soul avatar of a royal lord. It was his secret technique that made that royal lord freeze. His right eye was pitch black, and wherever its gaze landed, a large area of space was covered in darkness that swept up several royal lords. If young Kai were here, he would have been amazed by this sight. He had cultivated Myriad Demons Heaven's two-eye secret techniques, and his attainments in them weren't bad, however, he had never used them like this. This showed the differences between young Kai and the Myriad Demons Pass old ancestor in terms of their attainment in these two-eye secret techniques. Since these two-eye techniques were the core secrets of Myriad Demons Heaven, they naturally had their unique features. With one person's power against several royal lords, the Myriad Demons Pass old ancestor was also a bit overwhelmed and his soul avatar was violently shaken. It would not take too long for his eye secret technique to be broken. Still, it was enough. The big hand that reached out and caught the royal lord directly in his palm clenched fiercely at that moment. A mournful howl sounded as the clutched soul avatar almost directly collapsed. However, at the critical moment, other royal lords intervened and broke the enormous hand, saving the royal lord within. Even so, despite this royal lord surviving the attack, his soul avatar became very dull. He had obviously been seriously injured. Just two old ancestors were able to launch a near-deadly attack by joining forces. There were several other old ancestors who used their own methods to attack the royal lords who were affected by the Myriad Demons Pass old ancestors' Black Purgatory Eye, damaging several of them. No one remained idle, neither the royal lords, nor the old ancestors. Soul avatars were struck one after another as all sorts of exquisite soul secret techniques and soul-type artifacts clashed inside the black ink nest space. This type of battle was far more dangerous than ones in the outside world. After all, this involved their soul. Thus, the slightest mistake would spell death for them. The seven-colored light of the soul-warming lotus protection was wavering and its brilliance was weakening at a rate visible to the naked eye. Once the protection of the soul-warming lotus collapsed, with the space here still sealed, the old ancestors who entered here would definitely meet tragic ends. Everyone was attacking their opponents furiously except for old ancestor Xiao Xiao. Firstly, she needed to use most of her strength to keep the soul-warming lotus protection up. Secondly, she was looking for the right opportunity to strike. In this kind of fight, timing was critical and chances were fleeting. However, old ancestor Xiao Xiao was able to seize any opening around her. Her ninth order open heaven realm insight was enough to capitalize on such opportunities. 3 breaths later, when Myriad Demons Pass old ancestor once again used the demon eye of annihilation to freeze a figure he was focused on, old ancestor Xiao Xiao grit her teeth, let out a war cry, and shot out a golden light from her forehead. When the golden light appeared, the aura of her soul suddenly weakened, and even her soul avatar lost part of its form. This was a serious injury that not even an old ancestor could easily restore. However, it was still worth it. When the golden light shot out, it directly struck into a royal lord who was locked down by the Myriad Demons Heaven old ancestors' eye secret technique. In the next instant, the intense golden light penetrated deep inside the royal lord's soul avatar, drawing a deafening cry of anguish from his lips as his soul avatar rapidly weakened. In the blink of an eye, the might of his soul dropped from that of a royal lord to a territory lord's. With the follow-up attacks of 2 other Ninth Order masters, this royal lord's soul avatar was blasted apart. The black ink nest space, which was already trembling, shook even more violently. All the royal lords were shocked by what had just happened. Although they had injured a few old ancestors in the 24 breaths or so since the battle began, the first to fall was actually one of them. That was when they outnumbered the humans 2-1. They were alarmed at just how deadly these humans were. What was that golden light? It was undoubtedly that golden light which had the power to condemn a royal lord to death. Of course, the royal lord was not killed directly by the golden light, but rather due a series of attacks. Not only were the royal lords surprised by this outcome, many of the old ancestors were also astonished. No one expected old ancestor Xiao Xiao to have such a terrifying trump card. Only 2 of the old ancestors, who were good friends with old ancestor Xiao Xiao, looked at her with concern. It was as if they had guessed the nature of the golden light, so they were both happy and a little worried. If what they suspected was true, then that golden light, which had a great killing power, also has a considerable impact on its user. It was a soul-rending thorn. If the old ancestor could pass on to young Kai the method to refine and use soul-rending thorns, then she would naturally be able to use them as well. In order to refine this artifact, one needed to imbue a thread of their soul into it, and in order to activate it, a secret technique which sacrificed a large portion of their soul was required. For tens of thousands of years, old ancestor Xiao Xiao had kept and nourished 3 soul-rending thorns in her knowledge sea. She had never used them, as once these things were used, she would deal significant damage to herself in order to deal critical damage to an enemy. If she was not careful, she might get herself into a bind instead of killing the enemy. The last time she thought of using a soul-rending thorn was when she last fought against Mo Jiao. She would have used it if Yang Kai could not cut off Mo Jiao's link to his black ink nest. At that time, there was a great risk of using a soul-rending thorn because there was still the 9th Order black ink disciple on the battlefield. Fortunately, Yang Kai did not disappoint her and destroyed the royal lord's black ink nest, thereby cutting off Mo Jiao's source of power. She did not use one of these vicious artifacts to kill Mo Jiao, but she had no choice but to use one now. In fact, before entering this space, old ancestor Xiao Xiao was already prepared to use the soul-rending thorns because the black ink nest space was a battlefield of the soul. The effect of the soul-rending thorns could be fully displayed here. Yang Kai did not spend much time nurturing his soul-rending thorns yet at that time. He was able to cripple and even kill several territory lords and 8th Order black ink disciples despite his soul only being roughly on par with an 8th Order master's. On the other hand, old ancestor Xiao Xiao had been nourishing and refining her soul-rending thorns for millennia. At this point, each of her soul-rending thorns could be regarded as a peerless treasure. When unleashed, just one could deal enough damage to weaken a royal lord's soul to the level of a territory lord's. In the chaotic black ink nest space, the first to suffer a fatality was the numerically superior royal lords, which caused the remaining royal lords to go into a frenzy. At that moment, a second soul-rending thorn was fired. Again, a golden light shot out, and in an instant, it penetrated the body of another royal lord. That royal lord immediately looked terrified. He saw what happened to his companion, so now he knew what was about to happen to him. The soul-rending thorn dug in and began shredding his soul avatar, causing his strength to plummet. Although the remaining royal lords rushed to shelter him, the old ancestors acted faster, raining down secret techniques upon the wounded target. The effects of the attack were devastating and caused the royal lord's soul avatar to shatter. A second royal lord had fallen. The black ink nest space shook wildly. The royal lords were horrified now. The myriad demons cave heaven old ancestor shouted, "Xiao Yuya, I'll trap them, you kill them." After he said that, the demon eye of annihilation reappeared. This time, instead of using the black purgatory eye, the myriad demon's old ancestor used all his efforts to activate this eye secret technique. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao cursed to herself, "How old is this great-aunt now? How dare you call me Xiao Yuya? Fortunately, we're all 9th Order masters and there are no juniors around, otherwise, wouldn't those damn brats all die laughing?" Though she was snarling to herself, her actions remained swift. The third golden light shot out. All the royal lords tried their best to dodge, but the myriad demon's old ancestor, who had fully committed to using his demon eye of annihilation, proved to be too much. He locked his sights onto one of the fastest retreating royal lords and captured his figure in the vertical golden slit of his eye. In the next moment, the vertical slit actually rotated and turned into a horizontal line. At the same time, the royal lord who was targeted felt that his soul avatar warp and distort, like it was being crushed and torn apart all at once. His whole body began to tremble and he was barely able to maintain a coherent form. In that brief moment of delay, the third golden light had already plunged into his body. Die! The myriad demons' old ancestor roared furiously. His spiritual energy maddeningly gushed out as a series of golden rings suddenly manifested and contracted down into a single point. The trapped royal lord's soul avatar was crushed towards a central point, and despite his best efforts to resist, it was all useless. The soul-rending thorn exploded inside of him, making it difficult for him to focus his strength, and in the blink of an eye, the royal lord's soul avatar was crushed under tremendous pressure before exploding into pieces. The third royal lord had perished. The two previous royal lords who fell had their auras regress to the level of territory lords before they were blasted apart. However, this time, the royal lord's aura did not even have the time to fall as he was directly killed by old ancestor Xiao Xiao and the myriad demons cave heaven old ancestor. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5384, Kang. The entire black ink nest space was now filled with the spiritual energy that escaped from the death of these souls and shaking violently. When old ancestor Xiao Xiao and the myriad demons' old ancestor were unleashing their powers, the other old ancestors did not remain idle either. Just after the third royal lord fell, a fourth perished in quick succession. Although none of the humans had died yet, all were wounded and their soul avatars' luster were not as before. This battle had only raged for 30 breaths, yet in such a short duration, all of the 22 old ancestors had been injured in one form or another while 4 royal lords had died. It was not an exaggeration to say this was the most dangerous and fiercest battle in history. Although the humans had achieved huge successes so far, the situation was deteriorating quickly. Apart from their individual injuries, it was clear that the protection of the soul-warming lotus would not last long. In fact, the protection provided by this supreme treasure had already been vastly exceeded everyone's expectations. No one would be surprised if it were to collapse in the next breath. In addition, old ancestor Xiao Xiao had used 3 soul-rending thorns in a row and her soul was now severely damaged, causing her control over the soul-warming lotus to falter. The myriad demons' old ancestor obviously noticed this and did not ask old ancestor Xiao Xiao to cooperate with him to kill the enemy again. The humans were at risk of collective annihilation at any moment. Temporary gains would hardly resolve their crisis. All the old ancestors realized that if they did not break the black ink nest space and escape from this entrapment, they would all fall the moment the soul-warming lotus protection collapsed. An old man suddenly stepped forward and said, "No wonder my right brow kept twitching today. So, it ends here. My fellow Daoist brothers and sisters, stand guard for me one last time." A Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Master turned his head to look at him and exclaimed, "Pingyu. Enough nonsense." The old man bellowed, "I am from Bright King Cave Heaven and soul attacks are not this old master's strength. I'm not much use here, but if I can open a way for my fellow Daoist brothers and sisters, then I would not have lived in vain." As this old ancestor called Pingyu said, he was from Bright King Cave Heaven, and although his soul cultivation was indeed in the Ninth Order, he was less powerful than the others and his methods of attacking were very limited. Simply put, the role he could play on this kind of battlefield was minimal, and he felt that he was not of much use to the rest of his brothers and sisters. Everyone immediately understood what his intentions were and many old ancestors looked grim, but they were powerless to stop him. The old ancestor who tried to object earlier immediately clenched his fists and bellowed, "Push them back." As soon as he said that, all the Ninth Order Masters activated their soul secret techniques and artifacts and sent out a concentrated burst of attacks. To the surprise of the Royal Lords, the humans' attacks were not directed at them, but at a certain point in the black ink nest space, opening up a passageway free of interference. A Royal Lord quickly realized what the humans were trying to do and shouted frantically, "Stop them!" Following the shout, more than 40 Royal Lords blasted at the passage in order to destroy it. However, it was too late. The Bright King Cave Heaven old ancestor laughed heartily and charged out of the protection of the lotus. He dashed into the passage, and in an instant reached towards the edge of the space. His spiritual energy maddeningly surged as he roared, "Break! Asterisk Hong, star!" As his ninth order aura was annihilated, a tsunami of spiritual energy burst forth and opened a visible crack in the void. A loud boom reverberated throughout the black ink nest space, causing all inside to have their soul avatars shake. Even the outer protective layer of the soul-warming lotus rippled continuously, as if it might shatter at any moment. All the royal lords were stunned. That human had actually detonated his soul without any hesitation. Although the humans were clearly in a dire situation, trapped inside this black ink nest space, they had still killed 4 royal lords and had the strange lotus to protect them. The battle was nowhere near its end yet. Yet, this human chose to self-destruct. Just what kind of courage was required to do that? The human race was terrifying. At the same time, all the old ancestors were staring at the invisible shell which encompassed the space, and the next moment, their eyes lit up. The bright king old ancestors' self-detonation was not in vain. A crack had developed on the shell, and although it was not large, it was still a crack. The power of the Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Master's self-destruction was unimaginable. When the 4 royal lords fell earlier, it only caused this space to shake violently, but Bright King Cave Heaven's old ancestors' targeted sacrifice immediately tore the space open. "Go!" some old ancestors roared. If there was a break in the sealed space, then there was a way out. So, why hesitate to leave? However, before they could make a move, the royal lords frantically counterattacked. They were no fools and immediately understood what the humans were trying to do. If they let these Ninth Order masters escape, their entire ambush would become a joke. They had the humans trapped and outnumbered 2 to 1, yet 4 royal lords had perished, and although one of the humans also fell, that was due to him sacrificing himself, not their own efforts to kill him. All of a sudden, soul-warming lotus protection started to waver and the old ancestors found themselves stalled in place. During this momentary delay, the crack on the shell was filled with a powerful force and was quickly closing up. All old ancestors seethed with anger when they saw this happen. No one expected that this space could repair itself so quickly. Now their hopes of escape had evaporated. The protective glow of the soul-warming lotus had already faded to almost nothing, and it would surely be gone in less than 5 breaths. Once that happened, while they could probably take some of the royal lords down with them, the entire group of old ancestors would surely perish as well. When the Bright King Cave Heaven old ancestor self-destructed, a gap tore through the black ink nest space. Far away in the depths of the void, in an unknown place where the human race had not set foot for countless eons, a surge of energy fluctuations disturbed the countless years of silence. This fluctuation was extremely faint and came and disappeared almost instantly. A withered figure with almost no aura at all was disturbed by this fluctuation and suddenly opened his eyes. This figure could almost be regarded as a corpse. There was hardly any life in his body, which was now extremely withered with only skin and bones remaining. Anyone who saw him would not think that he was still alive. However, when he opened his eyes, they bloomed with dazzling light like 2 great sundays. The next moment, the living corpse suddenly laughed. It was impossible to know how many years he had not spoken for, so now his voice was dry and hoarse, making it extremely difficult to listen to. Finally, "Do we now have a promising generation of descendants?" He had sat here for countless years. At the beginning, there were some like-minded friends to chat with, but after so many years and without any resources to supplement themselves, his companions had fallen one by one. Now, he was the only one left to guard this place and slowly became a living dead. He did not dare to die so easily, and he could not leave, otherwise all their efforts would be in vain. He did not know how many years he had been asleep, as this place was devoid of all sound and light. However, just with those brief energy fluctuations, he was able to gain a lot of insight into what had happened. Someone's descendants had begun to counterattack and had touched the root of the Black Ink clan. Otherwise, it was impossible for the calm that had lasted for so many millennia to be broken. He had waited for untold generations for the human race to reach this point. The wait had been so long that even he felt despair. Today, when this ray of hope appeared before his eyes, he began to cackle happily. As he laughed, he suddenly raised his hands into the dark and slowly said, "Mo, you are the ancient supreme being of the Black Ink clan. why cause trouble for the little ones? His hand was nothing but skin and bones when it was raised, but in the blink of an eye, his physique was restored and it became like flawless jade. The calm within Void was completely broken in the next instant as the boundless darkness started to stir and surge towards the jade-white hand. As the hand crept forward, it began to crumble, and when it plunged into the heart of the darkness, only bones remained. It was this small skeletal hand that stirred up the entire surrounding space. There was a harsh wave of spiritual energy coming towards the Ninth Order Master, which was more powerful than anything a Ninth Order Master could produce, along with an angry roar. Kang, how dare you interfere? You court death. The living dead man called Kang scoffed, until I destroy you, old thing, I dare not die so easily. As he spoke, his hand slapped down onto the endless darkness. Inside the black ink nest space, the soul-warming lotus protection was so weak that it was barely visible. All the Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters knew that they were on the verge of death. They knew that they already had no hope of escaping from this place, so they steeled their resolve to kill as many royal lords before they fell. They had already come to terms with dying, but even if they all perished, they wanted to ensure that the Black Ink clan did not feel any better. The human race was gaining strength with each generation, so even if they all fell here, there would be more Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters in time to take their place. The only thing that old ancestor Xiao Xiao felt a little regretful over was that when she died here, the soul-warming lotus would be left behind. She was worried that Yang Kai would blame her for this. Still, she set aside those worries as she was about to die anyways. Catcher, star. The sound of something shattering suddenly reverberated in everyone's heart. After old ancestor Xiao Xiao had summoned the soul-warming lotus, they had held on for 30 breaths of time before its protection finally broke. All the royal lords were overjoyed, but soon, their smiles froze. At the moment the soul-warming lotus protection shattered, the Ninth Order Open Heaven Masters all shot forward with overwhelming murderous intent. Each of them pushed all the might from their souls without reservation, clearly not caring about their own lives. This confused the royal lords. It was as if the humans thought that they had the advantage over them. Just like the old ancestor who detonated his soul previously, the royal lords realized that these old ancestors were not afraid of death. Kill! Roared the royal lords. The human race was not afraid of death, and likewise they were not. Today's deaths were just the materials to lay the foundation for the future. Supreme Masters from both races no longer concerned themselves with surviving, only caring about slaughtering more enemies before they crossed the gates of death. Just before the two sides could engage in the final clash though, the entire Black Ink nest space suddenly shook violently, and the shaking this time was an order of magnitude greater than when the Bright King Cave Heaven Old Ancestor self-destructed. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5385, You Are Not Worthy. It happened so suddenly that no one knew what was going on. The Supreme Masters of both sides who were about to fight to the death all stopped and took a step back, looking at each other warily. They were not afraid of death, but the anomaly in the Black Ink nest space made them wary. After all, no one knew if the other side had set up some kind of trap. Catcher! Another shattering sound was heard, this one much louder than before. All the old ancestors and royal lords looked up, but as soon as they gazed into the distance, they were all stunned. The crack opened by the Bright King Cave Heaven Old Ancestors that had just closed, opened up again for some reason. The old ancestors were overjoyed. The reason why they decided to fight the royal lords to the death was because they had no hope of escape. Now that the crack had opened up again though, there was hope. Why should they die if they had a chance to live? They did not know why the crack opened again, but what surprised them most was that the crack seemed to open up much wider than when their fellow old ancestor self-destructed. Through the crack, they caught a glimpse of some vague images. There was no time to hesitate, so the myriad demons old ancestor bellowed, "Let's go." As soon as he shouted, blood flowed from his right eye. He was currently a soul avatar, so it shouldn't be possible for him to bleed. What flowed from his eyes was his own forceful burned soul essence. This moment, he was going all out. Blackness suddenly filled the space and wrapped up a number of royal lords who were in the way. The other old ancestors immediately did whatever they could to interfere with the royal lords while leaping towards the crack in the sky. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao had already sacrificed a large part of her soul and had to be carried away by another old ancestor. Many of the royal lords saw this and were extremely unwilling to let the humans escape. They turned their raging spiritual energy into a boundless onslaught to cut off the old ancestor's escape route. Without the protection of the soul-warming lotus, the Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters' soul avatars were faltering, and some of them may not be able to escape at this rate. Realizing this, one of the old ancestors turned towards the royal lords instead of heading to the crack, and a violent and fierce power burst from his soul. He decided to stay behind and follow in the path of the Bright King Cave Heaven Old Ancestor. By detonating his soul in the faces of the royal lords, he could buy a moment of time that the others would be able to use to escape. Just as he did so though, an even more powerful soul was already rushing towards those royal lords. Halfway there, his soul avatar ignited, making him look like a raging ball of flames. Great Battle Pass has 2 old ancestors, it can afford to lose one. Get out of here. All of you. The one that had rushed out was an old ancestor from Great Battle Cave Heaven. He was now burning his soul using some kind of sacrificial secret technique. There was no turning back for him now. As he roared, he was hit with a continuous stream of spiritual energy blasts from the royal lords, blowing holes in his soul avatar. However, this Great Battle Heaven Old Ancestor did not flinch in the slightest. In the blink of an eye, he had already rushed to the place where the royal lords had gathered, and his soul avatar flashed a fierce smile as he roared, "Burn." As soon as he roared, a dazzling light erupted from his soul avatar, and his already burning soul avatar suddenly turned into a sea of fire that engulfed the royal lords. The first few royal lords caught by this soul fire howled in agony, while the others tried to dodge in a fluster. However, they were too late. Their spiritual energy was like fuel for this soul fire, and the more they tried to extinguish it, the more intensely the flame burned. The flames did not discriminate and were rapidly catching up to the 20 surviving old ancestors who were fleeing towards the crack. Seeing that the soul fire was about to reach them, old ancestor Xiao Xiao, whose soul avatar was almost transparent, forced whatever power she had left into the soul-warming lotus and formed a thin barrier, covering the many old ancestors. The next instant, everyone rushed out of the crack and disappeared. The black ink nest space was left in shambles. A sea of fire covered the entire black ink nest space, engulfing everything in flames. The royal lords did not dare to remain any longer and rushed towards the crack, dragging their injured comrades along with them. Within a breath, this black ink nest space went from an intense battlefield to suddenly being devoid of anyone, leaving only raging flames behind. These flames were the product of a Ninth Order master sacrificing his soul. There was no telling how long it would take to extinguish. Darkness shrouded the unknown place, as harsh hissing sounds transmitted through the void, mixed with endless pain. Old man Kang chuckled as he casually commented, "This generation's descendants are all so courageous. It's no wonder they were the ones who managed to break through." "Mo, your end is near." A voice filled with hatred echoed back from the darkness, "Your people will forever be slaves." Kang faintly snorted, "You are not worthy." He turned his head and looked into the depths of the void. After countless years of waiting, the day had finally arrived. Great Evolution Royal City, in front of the collapsed high-rank black ink nest. Yang Kai and Xiong Shan both wore solemn expressions. Although old ancestor Xiao Xiao had only entered the black ink nest for several dozen breaths of time, the two of them felt like years had gone by. They could no longer feel the old ancestor's soul, which meant that the black ink nest space was sealed. That also meant that the Black Ink clan was prepared. They did not know what would happen to the old ancestor inside. Although they were worried, the two of them could not do anything to help at this point. They could only wait. They thought it would take some time, but who would have thought that just several dozen breaths later, the two of them once again sensed old ancestor Xiao Xiao's soul. They quickly looked over, and the old ancestor also rapidly opened her eyes. Yang Kai and Xiong Shan's faces changed dramatically. Old ancestor was injured, extremely seriously injured. Her face was as white as paper and she winced painfully as the aura of her soul fluctuated unsteadily. Yang Kai and Xiong Shan could not even imagine that in just a short duration of several dozen breaths, an epic battle must have been fought in the black ink nest space. It was a battle between 22 old ancestors and 50 royal lords. In this short battle, 4 royal lords and 2 old ancestors had fallen. The black ink nest space also had a strange crack opened in it. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao obviously did not intend to explain anything but quickly took some spirit pills and stuffed them into her mouth before weakly saying, "During the time I enter retreat to recuperate, Commander Xiangshan, heed my words, the war is not over. The Black Ink clan still has very strong forces hidden in the shadows." Xiangshan's face changed slightly before he cupped his fist and bowed. Understood. If the old ancestor was so afraid, then the Black Ink clan's hidden forces must be extremely dangerous. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao then turned to Yang Kai and said, "You, come with me." Upon saying this, she shot towards Great Evolution Pass followed by Yang Kai. The old ancestor was so badly wounded that she had to use the power of his small universe to heal her wounds. Naturally, Yang Kai was used to this. After following her back to Great Evolution Pass, Yang Kai immediately spread out his small universe and let the old ancestor enter to recover. He could feel that old ancestor Xiao Xiao's soul was badly injured. He just did not know what had happened to her in that black ink nest space. Fortunately, there was no need to worry about her life. The soul-warming lotus was still with the old ancestor, and with it, no matter the damage, her soul would quickly recover. Furthermore, there was the difference in how fast time flowed in Yang Kai's small universe, so it should not take long for old ancestor Xiao Xiao to fully heal. If old ancestor Xiao Xiao was in such a state though, then what about the other Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters? After all, old ancestor Xiao Xiao was not the only one who entered the black ink nest space this time. It seemed, this time, some of them must have fallen. Yang Kai's heart sank when he thought of this. When the human race launched their crusade across the 106 theaters, dozens of royal lords were killed without any losses among the Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters. Of course, it was inevitable that some of them were injured. However, this time, it was almost certain that some Ninth Order old ancestors had fallen. The confrontation in the black ink nest space was just that dangerous. While Yang Kai was assisting the old ancestor heal, the celebratory atmosphere in Great Evolution Pass slowly changed. Xiangshan, as the head of the army, intentionally reversed the atmosphere. People tended to let their guard down if they continued to celebrate. If a battle really began, then they would be caught off guard. Although it was a bit cruel to deprive the soldiers of this moment of joy, it had been like that for countless years. The human race had always been like that, constantly under the pressure of the Black Ink clan, forced to forge ahead while never compromising. Within a few days, 2 shocking messages reached Great Evolution Pass from other Great Passes. Bright King Cave Heaven's old ancestor had died in the black ink nest space. Great Battle Heaven's old ancestor had also perished in the black ink nest space. It was said that 22 Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters had gathered to explore the black ink nest space. However, the Black Ink clan had laid an ambush. The moment the old ancestors entered it, the black ink nest space was sealed and 50 royal lords attacked together. The old ancestors fought valiantly and managed to kill 4 royal lords despite terrible odds. Bright King Cave Heaven and Great Battle Heaven's old ancestors sacrificed themselves in order to give the other old ancestors a chance to escape. 2 old ancestors had died in battle. The entire human race mourned for this loss. Now not only Great Evolution Pass, but all the humans knew that the war with the Black Ink clan was far from over. On the surface, more than 100 theaters had been pacified and the Black Ink clan had been decimated. However, lurking in the dark, the Black Ink clan had an even bigger hidden force. The story of Black Ink clan's mother nest began spreading throughout the Great Passes. The mother nest was perhaps the root of the Black Ink clan where its hidden forces were located. To completely eradicate the Black Ink clan, the mother nest must be destroyed. So, after more than 100 theaters were pacified, the humans celebrated for a brief moment before they entered a state of war again. Wounds were treated, and while some began cultivating, others were sent out to mine resources in order to prepare for the coming battle. There would be more battles ahead, ones that would be even more dangerous than all those experienced before. Within Yang Kai's small universe, the 4 army commanders gathered in a small house. The house was left by the hunter and his wife, and although hundreds of years had passed in his small universe, Yang Kai had kept it in pristine shape because old ancestor Xiao Xiao would come here every time she needed to heal. This was the first time Xiong and the others had truly entered Yang Kai's small universe, so it did not take long for them to notice that time flowed faster than normal here. It was no wonder Yang Kai's cultivation speed was so much greater than average. This kind of time differential was all but impossible for others to emulate. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5386, Bad News, Good News. They could also perceive that the world force within Yang Kai's small universe was extremely refined, unlike what ordinary 7th-order open heaven realm masters could have. This was probably the effect of the world tree clone, which was able to purify world force. This was also one of the reasons why Yang Kai's small universe was different from the other 7th-order open heaven realm masters in terms of weight. It also allowed him to showcase power that should not be seen in his cultivation realm. The purer and denser one's world force was, the more power they could exert. Although there was some envy, no one felt sore about it. The world tree clone was very beneficial, but it was only the most effective in Yang Kai's small universe. Even if an 8th-order master obtained it, it would only enhance their own strength. Unlike Yang Kai, whose small universe had time flowing at a different rate compared to the outside world, and could amplify the world tree clone's effectiveness to its limits. Although 8th-order and 9th-order masters were the main forces of the human race today, 7th-order open heaven realm masters such as Yang Kai were the hope for the human race's future. That was why when Yang Kai obtained the world tree clone in the Blue Sky Theater, Ding Yao and others did not take it, but rather allowed him to keep it. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao still looked pale. Her injuries were so severe that even though she had the soul-warming lotus and was using Yang Kai's small universe to recuperate, the wounds did not heal so easily. However, her condition was much better compared to when she just returned from the Black Ink Nest space. At this moment, old ancestor Xiao Xiao was telling Xiong and the others about what happened in Black Ink Nest space. The 4 army commanders all listened solemnly. Although a lot of information had arrived from other great passes already, it was far less detailed than what old ancestor Xiao Xiao was telling them. 22 old ancestors collaborated to probe the Black Ink Nest space, but they were ambushed by 50 royal lords as soon as they entered. The ensuing battle was so intense that neither the old ancestors nor the royal lords could hold anything back. In the end, the old ancestors managed to kill 4 royal lords while 2 of their own sacrificed themselves to allow the rest to escape. In just a few dozen breaths of time, 6 top masters from the 2 races perished. When the human race intentionally did not destroy those 22 high-rank Black Ink Nests, the Black Ink clan must have guessed our intentions to enter the Black Ink Nest space to pry for information. Thus, they gathered a number of royal lords in advance for the ambush, old ancestor Xiao Xiao said softly. Xiong frowned and said, the battle reports from earlier indicated that the royal lord that used to be at the Yin-Yang Theater was among those who escaped. Did old ancestor feel her aura in the Black Ink Nest space? Not all royal lords were killed in the previous Grand War across the 106 theaters. Roughly half of them were killed, while the other half escaped. Now, no one knew where they were hiding. The royal lord of Yin-Yang Theater was known to be one of the survivors. Yin-Yang Pass was originally the place where old ancestor Xiao Xiao was assigned, and she had fought with that royal lord for tens of thousands of years, so they could not be more familiar with one another. However, later when the Southern Army commander of Yin-Yang Pass, Wu Qing, broke through and reached the 9th Order, old ancestor Xiao Xiao was given the mission of retaking Great Evolution Pass. Now, Wu Qing was at Yin-Yang Pass, serving as its old ancestor. Wu Qing had just advanced to the 9th Order, so compared to the rest of the old ancestors, he was not very strong. Although he was unable to kill the old royal lord when they fought at the Yin-Yang Theater, the royal lord found herself outmatched when Wu Qing was joined by several 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters. Thus, she eventually fled into the void, her whereabouts now unknown. The reason why Xiong asked this question was because he suspected that the royal lords who ambushed the humans in the Black Ink Nest space were not the ones who escaped from the other theaters. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao shook her head and replied, I didn't feel her aura. Xiong frowned and replied, then the problem is very serious. In recent days, I had also queried the other old ancestors who were involved. I asked them similar questions, but none of them felt any familiar auras among the 50 royal lords that participated in the ambush. In other words, among those 50 royal lords, not one was an old acquaintance of the surviving 20 old ancestors. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao declared solemnly, those royal lords were all fresh faces. Their strength was there, but they were unable to fully display it. It was as if they did not have much experience in fighting. Although the battle only lasted several dozen breaths of time, old ancestor Xiao Xiao had tens of thousands of years of combat experience, so she was easily able to notice such details. At the time, she was too busy fighting and preserving her life to pay attention to this, but now, looking back, there were many questions that were unanswered. She knew what Xiangshan was trying to determine. If there were 50 royal lords who they had never seen before, plus those who had escaped from the theaters, that meant that there were almost 100 royal lords still alive. It was a terrifying force. What made it even more unbelievable was that these royal lords did not have much experience in fighting. It was as if their strength was attained totally from intense cultivation rather than being built up through millennia of tempering in war. The fact was, if it was not for those royal lords' clumsiness in battle, the old ancestors would not have been able to rally themselves so quickly to defend and then counterattack. Additionally, if those royal lords had concentrated on just one or two old ancestors at a time, they would have been able to kill all of them very quickly. However, they did not do that. Instead, they all just wildly pushed their spiritual energy to bombard them indiscriminately. Such a way of fighting could only be described as foolish. And I suspect that the Black Ink clan has more forces hidden than what we've seen. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao frowned with worry. Liu Zhiping remarked softly, there are more of them. 100 royal lords was already a problem. If there were more of them, then how could the Black Ink clan be eradicated? The Black Ink clan still has its limits. For instance, that Black Ink nest space was not impregnable. With 50 royal lords and 22 old ancestors fighting, the clashing of spiritual energy shook that space quite violently. It looked like that was the limit of what that space could withstand. If there were even a few more, it is difficult to say whether that space could endure the impact. The Black Ink clan was able to estimate the limit of the Black Ink nest space's tolerance. However, when the Bright King Cave Heaven old ancestor self-destructed his soul, he managed to exceed that limit and tear open a crack in the Black Ink nest space. The Black Ink clan must not have expected that a human race master could be so decisive. Mi Jinglun understood and said, so, Black Ink clan may not only have 50 hidden royal lords, they simply deployed 50 because that was the limit the battlefield could handle. Oyu Yang Lai smacked his lips and said, that's bad. There is good news though. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao's expression suddenly became a little odd and she appeared to be contemplating something before she murmured, we may not be the only ones fighting this war. What does old ancestor mean by that? Liu Zhiping asked curiously. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao replied, in fact, at the end of the battle, the soul-warming lotus protection had been shattered, and we were already on the verge of death. We were preparing to go all out in a final battle to the death with those royal lords. However, at that critical juncture, the sealed Black Ink nest space cracked open once again. Mi Jinglun gasped. The power released by the two races was so strong that it went beyond the limit of what the Black Ink nest space could withstand. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao shook her head and explained, the gap was opened from the outside. Everyone was stunned when they heard that. A gaping hole opened from the outside and saved the lives of 20 old ancestors at a critical moment. Who opened it? How was it opened? No one knew. However, this was also the reason why old ancestor Xiao Xiao said that their present army might not be alone in this war. That crack opened at a very timely moment. If it had opened a little later, more of the old ancestors would have been killed and injured. What surprised old ancestor Xiao Xiao was that through the crack, she vaguely saw a big hand that looked like it was made of white crystal jade. It was a pity that she could not see it clearly because the power was too chaotic and the event was so short-lived. The only thing that was certain was that the hand was the source that opened the Black Ink nest space. Without that hand, there was no way they would have escaped from that space. Interesting, Xiangshan suddenly smiled inexplicably. In addition to the other armies from the other theaters, there is actually another party that is fighting against the Black Ink clan. Mi Jinglun's eyes lowered and pondered aloud, is this other party hostile or friendly? Yang Lai looked at him as if he was a fool and said with disdain, "If that power helped the old ancestors get out of trouble, isn't that obvious as to whether it was hostile or friendly?" Jing-lun shook his head with a light smile and said, "Who knows? If it was that obvious, then why didn't they contact us before? Why did they have to wait till the very last moment before revealing themselves? Was something restricting them from showcasing their power, or was it all intentional?" Yang Lai raised his eyebrows and said, "Aren't you overthinking this?" He seemed annoyed with Big Head Mi, who always made issues more complicated than they were. Was it not better to keep things simple? Jing-lun shook his head solemnly and said, "It's not that I want to overthink things, I just can't help worrying." According to what the old ancestor said, a lone party was able to break open the black ink nest space from the outside, which means this person or party must be more powerful than all the old ancestors combined. Yang Lai was dumbfounded. The old ancestors were Ninth Order masters, the strongest warriors in existence. Who could be more powerful than them? If this unknown party was friendly to the human race, then it would be a blessing. However, if it was hostile, then it would be far more difficult to deal with compared to the Black Ink clan. At the very least, the humans knew the Black Ink clan quite well today. They did not know anything about this hidden party. It was easy to dodge a spear in the light, but difficult to avoid an arrow in the dark. Xiong Shan looked at Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao and asked respectfully, "Old Ancestor, is the Ninth Order really the limit of cultivation? Is it possible to go further?" When he asked this question, even Yang Kai, who had been uninvolved so far, listened eagerly. No one other than the Old Ancestors, who had reached the Ninth Order, had any insights into whether there was a higher realm than the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm. It was said that there was no peak to the martial Dao, but was there really no limit? However, according to the current situation on the human side, the Ninth Order appeared to be the peak of martial Dao. Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao was silent for a moment before replying, "The cultivation of the Open Heaven realm is mainly related to one small universe. As the volume of the small universe increases, their order rises. The First Order is the lowest while the Ninth Order is the limit. We have been exploring if there is anything higher beyond the Ninth Order. I don't know about the others, but personally, with my level of cultivation, the volume of my small universe has reached its limit and there is no way to improve any further." In other words, the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm was Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao's limit. She could not say if that was the same situation for the other Ninth Order Open Heaven realm masters. In all these years, no one had ever gone beyond the Ninth Order. No one had ever seen any power beyond the Ninth Order. Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao then added, "Moreover, in regards to that party that helped us escape, we do not know how powerful or what realm they were in. The situation was too chaotic and there was no way to perceive it accurately. Even if the other party is stronger than us, perhaps they have not transcended the Ninth Order." After a lifetime of cultivation, the concept of Ninth Order being the peak was deeply rooted in their psyches. When someone suggested the possibility of a higher realm than the Ninth Order in this world, it was difficult for Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao to believe it. After all, she had made this judgment based on thousands of years of her own experience. Martial Peak, Chapter 5387, A Grander Crusade. No matter what realm the other party has reached, or whether they are friend or foe, at least, in terms of dealing with the Black Ink clan, their stance is the same as ours, Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao continued. Furthermore, this other party should be under some kind of restriction. Otherwise, it makes no sense why they have not contacted the human race after all these years. I even suspect that they are some ancient force or a remnant of a force from a distant era. Before this, no one had thought that there was another force in the world that stood against the Black Ink clan. Before coming to Great Evolution Pass, Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao guarded Yin-Yang Pass for tens of thousands of years, but even she had never heard anything about another force before. Neither had the other Old Ancestors. If the other party had not taken the initiative to help them out this time, they would still be ignorant of their existence. There was only one possibility now, that the power was a remnant from a very distant era. So long that even the Old Ancestors had never heard of it. Jing-lun nodded slightly and said, "Since the other party has a similar stance to ours, we can ally with them. The question is, where are they, And who made that move? Old ancestor Xiao Xiao narrowed her eyes and said, if I am not mistaken, their location should be where the Black Ink clan mother nest is. All the army commander's pupils contracted, but after a moment of reflection, they understood why the old ancestor had made such a judgment. The Black Ink nest space that old ancestor Xiao Xiao and the other old ancestors entered this time should be the creation of the Black Ink clan mother nest. Since the unknown master was able to break open the space from the outside, it meant that they could not be too far away from the mother nest. They must have directly attacked the mother nest, otherwise, it was impossible to accomplish this. In other words, if they found the mother nest, they should be able to find the person behind that mysterious attack. But where was the mother nest? Although they might be able to find some clues in the high-rank Black Ink nest, who would dare to enter that place again considering what just happened? The Black Ink clan's ambush must still be there, so going back would be suicidal. Even so, the humans had some suspicions as to where the mother nest was. Since ancient times, those in the Great Passes had never conquered a royal city, not to mention the void beyond the royal cities. The war is not yet over, and the crusade will continue. For now, let the soldiers in the inner sanctum recuperate some more. I have a feeling that the next battle may be more dangerous. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao finally commanded. Xiong Shan and the others listened gloomily. As a ninth-order open heaven realm master, she had an extremely keen perception for danger, even danger that had yet to manifest. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao would not have said such words for no reason. Soon, Xiong Shan and the others left so that old ancestor Xiao Xiao could continue to recuperate. The theaters everywhere were pacified and the Black Ink clan was defeated. However, the human soldiers only enjoyed a few days of peace and quiet before they entered a state of intense war preparation again. Alchemists and artifact refiners at every great pass became busy. Information was passed back and forth between the great passes. The term crusade was used by the top brass of the human race when attacks were launched against the royal cities in the theaters. However, now the human race's army was preparing for an even grander crusade. A crusade to the Black Ink clan mother nest. Yang Kai also could not help but feel a sense of urgency. In the previous battles, he played an indispensable role on the battlefield. He was able to kill a powerful territory lord like Che Kong and even destroyed a lot of mid-rank Black Ink nests. He was also the one who killed a ninth-order Black Ink disciple with a punch. However, all those achievements had many coincidental elements. In the end, he was still just a seventh-order open heaven realm master. When old ancestor Xiao Xiao said that the future battle was going to be more dangerous than ever, how could he protect himself and the others around him unless he was at least in the 8th order open heaven realm? But the 8th order. Yang Kai estimated that even with his current rate of cultivation, he would require at least 1,000 years to reach the 8th order open heaven realm master. By the time he managed to get to the 8th order, the wars would be over. Time was not on his side. In fact, he took only a few hundred years to advance to the 7th order open heaven realm, so even if he took another 1,000 years to break through once more, his rate of advancement was already extremely terrifying. Which 8th order division commanders had not taken several thousand years to break through from the 7th order to the 8th order? Just look at Feng Ying. She was one of the most talented cultivators of her generation, but she spent 3,500 years in the 7th order before just recently achieving a breakthrough and advancing to the 8th order open heaven realm. And that was already considered faster than usual. On average, it took 7th order masters 5,000 years to break through. As for the advancement from the 8th order to the 9th order, that was a 10,000-year endeavor at best. The growth of a human was simply too slow. Yang Kai did not lack resources to cultivate with, so during old ancestor Xiao Xiao's recuperation, he was constantly refining materials and spared no expense to expand the number of small stone race in his own small universe. Although there was no way for him to break through and enter the 8th order open heaven realm in a short period of time, he could still increase his strength. Xiong Shan would from time to time come over to pass on some messages to old ancestor Xiao Xiao and to seek her opinion on certain matters. He did not keep anything from Yang Kai either. Thus, Yang Kai was able to hear some confidential information. 3 months after the old ancestors' return from the Black Ink nest space, the Great Evolution Army, which had been resting outside of the royal city, began to buzz again. It started to move beyond the royal city towards the depths of the void. It was the same for all the major theaters and the great passes. Another crusade had begun. According to the old ancestors, it was vital for them to eliminate the remaining enemy. Previously, the human race in the other theaters had decimated the Black Ink clan such that they could no longer form a coherent army. Regardless of the situation at the mother nest though, they could not give those fleeing Black Ink clansmen any opportunity to regroup and reorganize. There were dozens of royal lords who had escaped, and several times more territory lords and feudal lords who, though wounded, still breathed. There were no concerns about the morale of the humans. After the news of the mother nest was intentionally spread, all the soldiers knew that the war was far from over. Until the Black Ink clan was destroyed, the human race would never relent. Scouts were sent out to perform reconnaissance on the route ahead so the army commanders could adjust their strategy. In fact, the human race had always been curious about the void beyond the royal cities as it was a land that humans had never set foot in. However, before the theaters were pacified, the human race had no ability to explore that void as the royal cities in front of this void were an impassable biggest obstacle. Now, the human race was finally going to explore this mysterious place. There was nothing unusual in the first month. However, after another month, some of the scouts who had gone on ahead found the corpses of Black Ink clansmen in the void, which was very unusual. When the squad tried to investigate, they were attacked by an unexplained force. There would have been casualties if not for their warship's protection. When the encounter was reported to the Great Evolution Army, Xiong Shan took it very seriously and went to check the situation personally. He came back soon after. In Yang Kai's small universe, in the same small courtyard, old ancestor Xiao Xiao frowned and remarked, "A residual divine ability." Xiong Shan nodded and said, "Yes, one that is still very powerful. Though I don't know how many years have passed since it was formed, those dead Black Ink clansmen must have been the ones who escaped from the royal city and ventured into that area. They ended up triggering the residual divine ability, and died as a result." "How strong is it?" old ancestor Xiao Xiao asked. "The one I touched was almost equivalent to the full-powered strike of a 7th-order master." "That is indeed strong." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao appeared grave and asked, "Are there many such divine abilities left?" Xiong Shan replied with a grave expression, "There was no way to investigate. I sensed some divine abilities as they were obvious and could be detected at a glance, but there were others that were extremely well hidden. Some are completely unnoticeable unless they are triggered. I suspect that there are not only residual divine abilities, but many other arrays as well." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao frowned as she muttered, "Residual divine abilities and arrays. There were two kinds of spirit arrays in this world, innate and man-made. If the road ahead had residual divine abilities, then it was impossible that these arrays were naturally formed. They had to be man-made. Old ancestor, I suspect that in ancient times, there was a force that fought against the Black Ink clan in this stretch of void. There must have been countless great experts involved who set up and arranged those residual divine abilities and natural arrays." Yang Kai suddenly interjected, "A divine ability see, Chem?" Xiong Shan looked at him in confusion. Yang Kai said, "Once, when I was in Shattered Heaven, I was chased by an 8th-order master and had to escape to the Divine Spirit Ancestral Land in the Shattered Ruins. That Divine Spirit Ancestral Land was surrounded by a massive divine ability sea, which concealed innumerable divine abilities and spirit arrays. It was almost certain death for any trespassers, even 8th-order masters. At that time, I did not know why the Divine Spirit Ancestral Land was surrounded by such a dangerous layer of traps and arrays, so I ventured in unaware. I originally thought that those divine abilities were left by the Divine Spirit themselves, but later I learned that it must have been arranged by some great experts in ancient times who were trying to seal in a Black Ink giant spirit god. Of course, those arrangements became unnecessary as the Black Ink giant spirit god was eventually eroded by the ancestral land's ancestral strength and his vitality was completely worn down before he could get that far. From ancient times to the present, even after countless years, the divine ability sea set up by those great experts of the past is still extremely powerful. While it must have weakened after so much time, its effectiveness is still quite shocking. In fact, if the black ink giant spirit god was able to get out of the trap, it would still be greatly hindered by that divine ability C. The situation in the void ahead is somewhat similar to the divine ability C outside of divine spirit ancestral land, only that it's not as obvious. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao nodded and said, "Now that you mention it, I do have some memory of that. Rumor has it that there is indeed a vast field of divine abilities outside the divine spirit ancestral land, though I have not seen it before." She had been on the black ink battlefield for so long that if Yang Kai did not mention about this divine ability C, she would not have thought about it. So, it seems that the source of the divine abilities and arrays up ahead and the divine ability C outside of the divine spirit ancestral land should be from the same era. Let's call them the ancients. They may have had a great battle against the Black Ink clan here, so there are many residual divine abilities, as well as many restrictions and arrays, old ancestor Xiao Xiao said, and then her eyes lit up. If the divine ability C outside of the divine spirit ancestral land was to protect against the sealed black ink giant spirit god, then who is this divine ability C set up to guard against? Yang Kai and Xiong Shan looked at each other, and almost without thinking, immediately said, "The Mother Ness." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao nodded, "That's the only possibility. The mother nest must be located at an even deeper location, and many methods were used to guard against it. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5388, Giant Spirit God on a Rampage. But from the perspective of the later generations, that meant that the ancients had failed as the Black Ink clan managed to break out from the mother nest and built one royal city after another, harvested the nearby resources, hatched their black ink nests, bred more soldiers, and expanded the scale of the black ink battlefield. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao's eyes flashed as she speculated on the vital events of the ancient times. In order to fight against the Black Ink clan, the ancients must have built the Great Passes. These passes were created to resist the invasion of the Black Ink clan. Yes, the appearance of the cave heavens and paradises must also be connected to them. They are likely the founders who created the cave heavens and paradises in the 3000 worlds, cultivated various talents, selected the right people, and brought them to the Black Ink battlefield, a cycle which has continued on till this day. While talking, old ancestor Xiao Xiao vaguely recalled an ancient book she saw in Yin-Yang Cave Heaven once. It was very old, and unlike the other secret arts or secret books. It was more akin to a journal of sorts, which she came across by accident. The ancient book mentioned a little bit about the founding of Yin-Yang Cave Heaven, which was very consistent with their current speculations. However, she was not very strong at that time, and there were many ancient characters in that journal that were extremely obscure and difficult to understand. She had no interest in such dusty history back then, so she casually browsed through before placing it back. These were only her own speculations, and no one knew how things turned out during the ancient times unless they could find someone who survived from that era. However, that period was at least 1,000,000 years ago, and none of the living old ancestors was nearly that old. After gathering her thoughts, old ancestor Xiao Xiao said, "We should only be at the outer edge of this divine ability C now. If even the outer edge is so dangerous, just imagine what it is like inside. Pass the order down, maintain the highest level of alertness as we progress. We cannot get bogged down here before we even locate the mother nest." "Yes. What about the other great passes?" Old ancestor Xiao Xiao asked next. Xiong Shan replied, "Almost all the other theaters are facing the same situation as ours." "It's that big." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao's pupil constricted. The Black Ink battlefield was enormous, taking over 100 great passes to span it from one side to the other. Now, all the great passes were proceeding deeper into the void, searching for the mother nest, but the divine ability C was bearing all of their paths forward. This meant that the ancient great experts had filled this entire region of the Black Ink battlefield with divine abilities and spirit arrays. Such a feat was truly astonishing. With the heritages of the cave heavens and paradises, they could surely accomplish something similar, but the expenditure of time and resources would surely be beyond astronomical. Proceed carefully and report immediately if there are any abnormalities. Yes. Xiong Shan received her orders and retired respectfully. After he left, old ancestor Xiao Xiao murmured, "The ancients. Yang Kai frowned and pondered. He could not help but recall the scene he saw in the Dragon Clan's sacred treasure. The Crystal Palace seemed to carry with it the memory of ancient times. At that time, he thought it was all quite strange, but now it seemed to be somehow related to the Dragon Clan's bloodline talent. After all, the Tao of Time was the bloodline talent of the Dragon Clan. Back then, he saw the scene in the Divine Spirit ancestral land, where two supreme masters, the Dragon Emperor and Phoenix Empress of that age, fought against the Black Ink giant spirit god. They finally suppressed it and sealed it with the help of the sacred treasure of the different Divine Spirit clans. Yang Kai naturally did not know how many years ago that battle took place, but from the situation of that battle, the ancient great experts might not have been able to hold back the invading enemy. When Black Ink strength invaded the 3,000 worlds, even a giant spirit god had been corrupted by it. Right. Black Ink strength must have invaded the 3,000 worlds in the past. Was that royal lord suppressed and sealed in the Black Prison back then as well? He exclaimed. Yang Kai had entered the Black Ink battlefield through the Black Territory. It now seemed that the royal lord who was suppressed and sealed in the Black Prison had been there much longer than anyone could have imagined. Such ancient events were no longer traceable, so there was no way to really know what happened so many years ago. The situation that the human race needed to face today was grim. But this is also an opportunity, Yang Kai suddenly chuckled. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao looked at him and asked curiously, an opportunity? Yang Kai said, if the path ahead is really that hazardous, not many of the Black Ink clan that escaped will be able to survive. Those that do will clear a path for us. During the war to take the royal cities, not all the Black Ink clansmen were killed. In fact, many had escaped, and these Black Ink clansmen had varying levels of strengths. In the Great Evolution Theatre alone, numerous territory lords, feudal lords, even weaker Black Ink clansmen had managed to flee. With those Black Ink clansmen fleeing to the rear, it was as good as opening up a path for the Great Evolution Army. Thus, the Great Evolution Army could avoid many unknown dangers. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao thought about it and agreed that was indeed the case. She could not help but snicker slightly and suddenly regretted that she had hunted down too many territory lords. If they had let a few more territory lords escape, perhaps the path ahead could be more thoroughly cleared for them. However, under the circumstances, after the death of Mo Jiao and the Ninth Order Black Ink disciple, as someone in the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm, she was unchecked on the battlefield. Thus, naturally she wanted to kill ruthlessly. As Xiangshan said, some of the residual divine abilities were very obvious and could be seen at a glance, while others were hidden and would only flare up on contact. The scout squads experienced a lot of hardships because of this. Thankfully, after so many years, the power of many of these residual divine ability restrictions had degraded. Under the protection of the warships, there were no casualties. Even inside Great Evolution Pass, Yang Kai could detect the occasional energy fluctuations outside. They were naturally the hidden divine abilities or restrictions that were triggered. However, Great Evolution Pass was so large and had such strong barriers around it that these occasional bursts did not pose any threat to it. Suddenly, old ancestor Xiao Xiao, who was sitting on a wicker chair and resting peacefully, had her eyes shoot open as she looked up suspiciously towards the sky. Yang Kai, who was cultivating nearby, noticed and also turned to where she was looking. At first, he did not notice anything unusual, but soon, his face changed slightly and he retracted his small universe. The barrier protecting the Great Pass had a crack in it, and looking beyond this opening, Yang Kai saw the scene outside. Out in the void, a huge figure was charging forward, carrying a huge bone of unknown origins in his hand. He brandished it around as if there were endless enemies on all sides and he was smashing them apart. Every time he swung the bone in his hand, the void itself shuddered. The huge figure shot past Great Evolution Pass, causing it to tremble noticeably. The mere passing of this enormous figure had caused the protective barriers around the pass to quake. Even those Eighth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, who were responsible for protecting the pass, were affected. Yang Kai had no doubt that if the bone in that figure's hand had hit Great Evolution Pass, even if all the defensive arrays were fully operational at this moment, it might not have been able to withstand the impact. A giant spirit god! Yang Kai shouted out loud. In the deep depths of the black ink battlefield, he had actually seen a giant spirit god. But why would one be here? Yang Kai was confused. This was the third giant spirit god he had encountered in his life. When the star boundary was dying, it attracted a giant spirit god called Ada, who fed on the dead worlds. However, Ada had waited outside the star boundary for decades, just snoring loudly as he slumbered. In the end, Yang Kai brought back a world tree clone which enabled the star boundary to recover. Eventually, Ada left. The giant spirit god clan was born with unmatched power, but they were childlike in their innocence and quite gentle, only feeding on completely dead worlds. When the star boundary recovered, Ada did not linger any longer. Later, Yang Kai met a second giant spirit god, in the vast void. By catching a ride with Yang Kai entered the chaotic dead territory, where he befriended Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan and gained a lot of benefits. However, after they parted, Yang Kai heard no news of either Ada or Although they were huge and traversed the 3,000 worlds freely, it was like they simply disappeared, never to be seen again. It was truly bizarre. Yang Kai never expected that there would be a giant spirit god in the black ink battlefield, and very much unlike Ada and Ra's mildness, this giant spirit god radiated an intense fury, as if he was out to kill all living being. This was very strange. Just like Yang Kai and old ancestor Xiao Xiao, the entire Great Evolution army was dazzled by the sight of the giant spirit god dashing through the void. The giant spirit god clan were very few in number, so although all of them had heard of these strange beings before, almost none of them had ever seen one before. Not to mention, this was the black ink battlefield. No one had ever heard of a giant spirit god living on the black ink battlefield. After a moment of silence, old ancestor Xiao Xiao suddenly shot up and chased after the giant spirit god. Yang Kai hesitated for a moment before following suit. He had been in Great Evolution Pass this whole time and had not checked out the surrounding void. When he got out of Great Evolution Pass and looked around, Yang Kai was stunned. The surrounding void was actually dotted with points of light, just like a sky that was full of stars, a beautiful sight to behold. Even as Yang Kai marveled at this beauty, he could sense the dangers hidden within. The dots of light were all divine abilities left over from the ancient times. The whole void was filled with chaotic and dense energies, and it was these energies that had been nourishing these divine abilities and arrays for countless years, allowing them to persist to this day. However, these divine abilities were extremely unstable and would explode at the slightest touch. As Great Evolution Pass advanced, it inevitably touched a lot of these things. All the bursts of energy were blocked off by the shields of Great Evolution Pass, so the soldiers inside were not affected at all. Without dallying any further, Yang Kai followed after the old ancestor. Although he was proficient in the Tao of space, he still could not keep up with old ancestor Xiao Xiao, who was in the Ninth Order, thus, was steadily falling behind her. Soon though, he perceived the old ancestor's aura rapidly coming towards him. In the blink of an eye, the old ancestor appeared in front of him, looking somewhat frantic, as if there was some great danger behind her. Yang Kai still did not understand why the old ancestor came back all of a sudden, but she did not give him time to ponder on it as she simply grabbed his hand and shouted, "Run!" After she said that, she dragged Yang Kai away. In the blink of an eye, they were hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. Along the way, they inadvertently touched a hidden restriction which was blown apart by her fist. It was only when the old ancestor dealt with this restriction that Yang Kai came to his senses and turned around to look back. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5389, Fated to Meet. The giant spirit god's huge figure was rushing over again, waving the huge bone in his hand, smashing the void on all sides, causing it to crumble and crack. Yang Kai was stunned for a moment and said with surprise, "Another giant spirit god?" Old ancestor Xiao Xiao shook her head and said, "It's still the same one. Why is he back?" Yang Kai was puzzled. The old ancestor had no answer to his question and quickly said, "Just wait and see." Yang Kai frowned, observed, and saw the giant spirit god come back towards them. He then flew off into the distance and disappeared in a flash. Though his movements appeared awkward and clumsy, his speed was astonishingly fast. He only appeared unwieldy because of his enormous size. Yang Kai did not understand what he was doing, and old ancestor Xiao Xiao did not explain. After waiting for a time, Yang Kai's eyes narrowed, and as he struggled to see the giant spirit god dash back towards them during his rampage all through the void, then disappear again. Yang Kai frowned deeply, wondering what the giant spirit god was doing. On the other hand, old ancestor Xiao Xiao just sighed. Although Yang Kai had some suspicions now, he wasn't certain yet. However, after the giant spirit god flew back and forth 3 times, he was able to confirm his theory. Is this giant spirit god already dead? Yang Kai asked. Although the giant spirit god exuded a strong killing intent, there was no trace of vitality coming from his body. What caused Yang Kai to feel frightened was seeing that the giant spirit god's body was full of wounds, ones that had obviously been inflicted long ago but never healed. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao said with great concern, "You could say that. Then why?" Old ancestor Xiao Xiao knew what was on Yang Kai's mind and said, although the giant spirit god clan is incredibly powerful, their thought process is extremely simple. Although I do not know what actually happened to him before he died, from his behavior, he must have been fighting against countless mighty enemies before he died. As he traveled back and forth, the giant spirit god kept waving the giant bone in his hands, as if there were an endless number of enemies around him that were attacking him. The giant spirit god's malevolent aura was also extremely terrifying. The Black Ink clan, Yang Kai gasped. Under such circumstances, who else could be giant spirit god's enemy? It had to be Black Ink clan. Although he did not know what the ancient battles were like, he could tell by looking at the state of the giant spirit god that he was in a desperate situation. He must have defeated untold numbers of enemies before eventually dying of exhaustion. Although his vitality had dissipated, his last will remained unbroken. Endless eons had passed by, yet he was still charging around this battlefield, tirelessly trying to kill the invisible enemy, never once ceasing. Perhaps, only when his physical body eventually collapsed would he stop. Yang Kai's heart inexplicably sank. Although he did not have any previous contact with this giant spirit god, both Ada and were incredibly friendly and good to him. They were truly gentle and innocent, never using their great strength to bully others. However, in ancient times, even a race as peace-loving as the giant spirit god were drawn into the war and eventually fell on the battlefield, which showed how dire the situation was at that time. The Black Ink clan was not only the greatest enemy of the human race, but also the greatest enemy of all living beings in the vast universe. "Let's go," old ancestor Xiao Xiao muttered solemnly. The giant spirit god was not alive. He was just repeating the actions of when he was alive, running back and forth on the battlefield, smashing those enemies that no longer existed. It was truly sad, but also worthy of respect. As Yang Kai followed old ancestor Xiao Xiao towards Great Evolution Pass, the giant spirit god once again charged forward from behind. Yang Kai suddenly looked back and thought that this giant spirit god might not simply be killing the enemy. Perhaps he was saving some humans or holding back the advance of the enemy. With the strength of a giant spirit god, it was obvious he could have escaped if he was defeated, but he persisted and remained rampaging on the battlefield. That meant that someone or something caused him to remain and fight, something more important to him than his own life. Perhaps, in that ancient battlefield, the ancient humans were fighting side by side with the giant spirit god right here, blocking the Black Ink clan army. They had no means to uncover such ancient events. Those who came after them could only retrace the journey of their forefathers. As for how it ended, that was anyone's guess. The deeper they traveled into the Black Ink battlefield, the more dangerous it became. It was hard to imagine the far past, and the amazing battle that must have happened between the ancients and the Black Ink clan. It was a war destined to end only in the total destruction of one side. The void was full of chaotic energy, with black ink clouds and seas of black ink strength scattered about. Where the chaotic energy and black ink strength entwined after countless years, they evolved to form endless dangers through the ages. 6 months after Great Evolution Pass departed from the royal city, old ancestor Xiao Xiao could no longer heal in peace. There were so many dangers around that it was sometimes impossible for the 8th Order Division commanders to handle on their own. For instance, when a certain massive spirit array was triggered, and the entire Great Evolution Pass defensive barrier nearly shattered, and old ancestor Xiao Xiao had to personally go out to protect the pass. At this point, the hidden dangers in the void had become strong enough to threaten 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters. This situation was true for all the human race armies. Many great passes had lost contact with each other already due to these chaotic energy outbursts. Yang Kai began to wonder if the royal lords who had escaped from the humans in each theater would even be able to make it back to the mother nest safely. After fighting the 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, those royal lords would surely be seriously wounded, and in this kind of environment, if they were not careful, they might die. At this time, Yang Kai was leading Dawn to scout ahead of Great Evolution Pass to check for possible dangers. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao sat inside the pass as she monitored the 4 directions in case something happened, ready to respond if she needed to. Dawn was a special operations squad and was adept at dangerous scouting missions. However, just in case of trouble, Dawn had an extra 8th Order with them. She was none other than Feng Ying. In the last battle in the royal city, Feng Ying rushed out at the critical moment and held back a territory lord who was pursuing Yang Kai. As a newly promoted 8th Order Master, Feng Ying was naturally no match for that territory lord and was injured during the battle. Later, there was a breakthrough in the situation. Che Kong, Mo Jiao, and the 9th Order Black Ink disciple, each died one after another. Feng Ying's territory lord opponent realized that the situation was not in the Black Ink clan's favor and attempted to escape. Feng Ying went all out to pin her opponent down, and with the help of other 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, she eventually managed to kill that territory lord. Now that Feng Ying was in the 8th Order Open Heaven Realm, she was supposed to have left Dawn to assume greater responsibilities. In fact, the army was reorganized just before Great Evolution Pass left the royal city. This was the 3rd time the Great Evolution Army went through a mass reorganization. The first time was when the Great Evolution Army was first established. The second time was when they retook Great Evolution Pass. Now was the 3rd and probably the last time. Feng Ying was now a division commander of the Western Army. Dawn also had some new faces. Yang Kai stood on the deck at the bow of the warship, using his divine sense to monitor in all directions, checking for possible hidden dangers. Apart from Dawn, there were dozens of other squads that were fanning out on the path ahead of the Great Pass. The reconnaissance teams would quickly map the route ahead and send their findings back to Great Evolution Pass, so that they could avoid any impending dangers. If there was a strong restriction or divine ability detected in front, the scouts would be responsible for triggering it. However, if it was too strong, then the 8th Order Division commanders who had gone along with the scouts would have to take action. If even the 8th Order Masters could not handle the threat, then they could only call the old ancestor to come forward to deal with it. The road ahead was known to be dangerous, so no one bothered to contact the old ancestor unless the threat was so great that even Great Evolution Pass shields would be unable to withstand the impact. So far, old ancestor Xiao Xiao had to intervene twice. The restrictions that were neutralized by the old ancestor were truly terrifying. If one was accidentally triggered by the scouting squads, there was a high possibility that they would be wiped out. On this day, Yang Kai was checking out the possible dangers ahead when a divine sense transmission reached his ear. "Brother Yang, come and take a look. There's something interesting here." Yang Kai turned his head to look over there, and without hesitation, he called out to Feng Ying to take command and dashed off. A short while later, when he reached the area that another squad was exploring, he took a look at the situation and was stunned by what he saw. He saw a figure standing in the void in front of him, his body covered in black blood. It was a Black Ink clansman. He was not just any Black Ink clansman though. From his aura, he was clearly a territory lord. Yang Kai even recognized this individual, smiled, and said, "It's really fate that we meet again after so long. How should I address you? This couldn't be helped." This territory lord was the one who chased after Yang Kai in the previous battle. Yang Kai did not know his opponent's name, but in the end, he had summoned Huang Xiniang's soul clone to block him. This territory lord had obviously defeated Huang Xiniang's soul clone, which now remained as a lifeless feather. Yang Kai placed the feather in his space ring and planned on returning it to Xiniang when he had the chance to see her at the no-return pass. He did not expect to meet this territory lord in such a place. Previously, the humans had relentlessly pursued the enemy, trying to eliminate as many as possible. In the battle over the royal city, old ancestor Xiao Xiao personally hunted down and killed most of the remaining territory lords. Only a few were lucky enough to escape. Yang Kai did not expect this territory lord to be one of those lucky few. Unfortunately for him, he managed to escape old ancestor Xiao Xiao's pursuit, but failed to avoid the dangers of this divine ability C, and was now trapped here by some kind of restriction. This territory lord's aura was a bit unstable and was obviously severely injured. There were several huge wounds all over his body with black blood still leaking out. Yang Kai knew what happened as soon as he arrived. This piece of the void was actually filled with numerous tiny void cracks, which must have been left behind by masters fighting during the ancient times. Furthermore, there were also some very powerful killing arrays nearby. Some of these void cracks could be seen with the naked eye, but others were completely invisible. When the territory lord fled to this place, he must have run headlong into this fractured region of the void, resulting in many fresh wounds. Now he was trapped and dared not move. In fact, Great Evolution Pass had encountered many void cracks along the way, ranging in size from tiny slivers to huge rifts that filled the sky, seemingly cutting the entire black ink battlefield apart. That was why Yang Kai was specially assigned to reconnaissance, as he was a master of the Tao of space and able to detect all the hidden void cracks. However, it was still rare to see a place as broken and cracked as this. It was almost like a prison for the fleeing black ink clansmen. This territory lord was fortunate to have even survived after barging into this kind of place. However, he was equally unlucky as he could not escape from this trap. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5390, Innate, Acquired, Source Domain. Yang Kai was in a good mood when he saw this territory lord, not only because he could avenge Huang Xinyang's soul clone, but also because if he was trapped here, that meant that the Great Evolution Army was going in the right direction. One of the 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters near Yang Kai was also overjoyed. This guy is really unlucky to come here of all places. Now he has truly gotten caught in a trap. Yang Kai laughed lightly and reached out at the space in front of him with his hand. The territory lord looked at the scene and scoffed sarcastically. This damned place was full of void cracks, each one practically indestructible. Even he could not withstand being cut by those cracks. He knew this well as he had tried several times to break out, and each time he ended up being cut up even worse than before. What made him feel more desperate was that while some of these cracks were visible to the naked eye, others were totally invisible, so there was no way he could detect them. The location of these cracks was also not fixed as their location changed as time went by. He was a territory lord. How could he be trapped here if not for all these damned void cracks? Now this 7th Order human even dared to grab at these void cracks with his bare hand. He would definitely suffer some pain, and if he was unlucky, his hand might even be cut off. While he was thinking about this, he saw Yang Kai's hand wave, and the hidden cracks of the void appeared one after another. Then with some mysterious power, Yang Kai grabbed a huge crack and held it in his hand. The territory lord was dumbfounded when he saw the void crack shatter in Yang Kai's hand. He could not believe what he had just seen. Territory lord was stunned and frozen in place. Then he suddenly remembered that he had encountered this human in the previous battle. He seemed to have some power related to the Tao of space. He did not understand such a power, and did not recall this immediately. However, what just happened undoubtedly explained something. After destroying one of the void cracks, Yang Kai asked, "Do you want to die or live?" Words were not as convincing as showing the other party that he had the means to save his life. Now, all that was left was the other party's desire to live. The territory lord pursed his lips and did not say a word. However, Yang Kai did not mind the snub. There was a blood feud between the human race and the Black Ink clan, one that could never be resolved. Turning down Yang Kai's offer was only to be expected. Yang Kai asked, "What's your name?" The territory lord was silent for a long time before he replied, "Ji Chen." Yang Kai's brow rose slightly as a response meant that the other party had some desire to live and might cooperate with them. It was easy to understand how this Ji Chen felt. He was caught between a death trap and his enemy was now willing to give him a chance to survive. Anyone would grasp the opportunity to survive. I'll ask you a question. If you answer me honestly, I'll save you and guarantee that no one will do anything to you for half a day. After half a day, whether you live or die depends on your own ability. Ji Chen said in a gruff voice, "How can I trust you?" He knew that if the tables were turned and it was he who discovered a trapped human master, he would definitely not let him go so easily. Yang Kai snickered and said, "Let me summarize the situation you are in. Whether you like it or not, you have to trust me. If you choose to trust me, there is a chance you will survive. If you choose not to trust me, you can remain here. I will not kill you, but good luck trying to get out of here on your own." Ji Chen's expression turned grim. He also knew that what Yang Kai said was the truth. It felt horrible to him that his head was on the chopping block while Yang Kai held the axe. If he could get away from here on his own, would he still be standing here? He had already attempted many times and each time he only wound up worse than before. If hadn't acted cautiously, he would have already died long ago. However, Yang Kai was just a seventh-order brat who had no right to represent the human race. The eighth-order open heaven realm master standing beside Yang Kai said impatiently, "Enough nonsense." Yang Kai said that no one will attack you for half a day, which means that you can escape for half a day. Mo Jiao, that son of a bitch, died during the battle over the royal city. You are one of the few territory lords that managed to escape. What else can you do to survive? Yet, you still dare to question us. The humans did not know much about the situation in the Black Ink clan, especially about the previously speculated mother nest. Although it was certain that there was a higher rank Black Ink nest above the high rank Black Ink nests, they still did not really know what exactly the mother nest was. What was there to lose from letting a territory lord live if he could tell them something about the mother nest? This eighth-order open heaven master was definitely aware of Yang Kai's intentions, which was why he said this. Ji Chen shook his head, looked past the two of them and said, "If it's the old ancestor who guarantees to spare my life, I will tell you anything you want." "Impudence!" the eighth-order master sternly shouted. After the eighth-order master roared though, the old ancestor suddenly appeared behind them. Apparently, she also found out about the situation somehow and rushed over long ago, but hid from sight. When the territory lord saw old ancestor Xiao Xiao, he obviously looked a bit nervous. This was the supreme human master who killed royal lord Mo Jiao. Every Black Ink clansman would be terrified of her. "Upon my name, I swear I will not kill you as long as you answer a few questions." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao looked at Ji Chen and said flatly, "You can choose not to answer, but if you dare to lie, I have ways to make you beg for death." Ji Chen looked conflicted for a while, but soon resigned himself to his fate and nodded, "Good." Old ancestor replied, "Regarding your high-rank Black Ink nests, is there a higher Black Ink nest that is the source of the Black Ink clan?" Ji Chen frowned and answered, "I'm not sure. Maybe." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao stared at him with narrowed eyes and asked, "Do you have a death wish?" Ji Chen quickly said, "I'm really not sure about this. I'm not lying." The old ancestor narrowed her eyes and asked, "How could you not know such a simple matter as a territory lord?" Ji Chen explained, "There are differences between territory lords. These things may be known to innate territory lords, but I am an acquired territory lord and don't know much about the secrets of the clan." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao was puzzled and asked, "Innate? Acquired? What are the differences between an innate territory lord and an acquired territory lord?" Even Yang Kai, who had lived amongst the Black Ink clan for years, never knew that there were any differences between the territory lords. After a high-rank Black Ink nest is fully grown, the earliest territory lords spawned from it are considered innate territory lords. After that, they are all acquired territory lords. As he said that, he glanced at Yang Kai. Sir Che Kong, the one this boy killed, was an innate territory lord. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao glanced at Yang Kai, but he just shrugged and smiled awkwardly. He was in a life-or-death situation, so who would care about whether a territory lord was innate or acquired? Furthermore, he had never heard of such a difference. "What's the difference?" Old ancestor Xiao Xiao asked. She had a hunch that this time, She might be able to get a lot of extremely confidential information about Black Ink Clan from Ji Chen. Ji Chen thought for a moment before answering. There are definitely big differences. Innate territory lords existed long before acquired territory lords and are generally much more powerful. However, the biggest difference is that they were directly born from the high-rank black ink nests. Thus, when they are born, they immediately have the strength and status of a territory lord. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao's eyes constricted, and Yang Kai was even more surprised as he exclaimed, "A royal lord black ink nest can directly spawn territory lords? If that was the case, how come there were so few territory lords?" Although there were more territory lords compared to 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, if what Ji Chen said was true, then there should be many, many more territory lords. Why did the Black Ink Clan not simply create more territory lords and overwhelm the human race? Is there some kind of limit? Old ancestor Xiao Xiao asked curiously. Ji Chen nodded. Yes. There is a limit. I have heard other territory lords say that the birth of an innate territory lord is inseparable from the source domain. In the ancient times, the royal lords emerged from the source domain with their own high-rank black ink nests. Those black ink nests carried some of the source domain's power in them, and only by relying on that power could innate territory lords be born. Source domain, old ancestor Xiao Xiao and Yang Kai were both in awe. It was the first time they had heard the term source domain. The term alone caused their imaginations to run wild. This was revealed by Ji Chen of his own accord, so they did not know if he did it intentionally. It now was clear that he did not want to die. Otherwise, why would he reveal such secrets so easily? Old ancestor Xiao Xiao wanted to urge him to reveal more and said, "In that case, the power of the source domain as you call it is what allowed the high-rank black ink nest to directly birth to territory lords, but by doing so, that power is drained and cannot be replenished." "That's right," Ji Chen said bitterly. "We acquired territory lords climb up slowly through hard work and cultivation. Yet, when compared to the innate territory lords, we are much worse in terms of status and strength." "Then you guys must really be miserable," Yang Kai snickered. Ji Chen shook his head and said, "There is a saying among your people, the heavens are fair in all things. Although innate territory lords are born extremely powerful, they will forever be territory lords for the rest of their lives. On the contrary, acquired territory lords who achieved our status through cultivation have a chance to one day become royal lords." "Why is that?" Yang Kai was puzzled. According to reason, the innate territory lords should be more privileged. Why was it different when it came to the Black Ink Clan? "I don't know," Ji Chen shook his head. "Sir Mo Jiao was once an acquired territory lord too." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao fell silent. It was a short conversation, but the information gathered was enormous. Innate territory lords, acquired territory lords, source domain. There were also royal lords who came out of the source domain with their own black ink nests. Mo Jiao, who had advanced to become a royal lord through his own efforts, was not one of them. The high-rank black ink nest that they found at Great Evolution Pass was left behind by a royal lord 30,000 years ago. Mo Jiao simply took over the nest. Without dwelling too much on it, old ancestor Xiao Xiao asked, "Back to my question, is the mother nest in your so-called source domain?" Ji Chen shook his head and replied, "I have never heard of a mother nest, so I don't know if it is in the source domain. None of us acquired territory lords have ever been in contact with the source domain. However, some of us had some guesses about the existence of a greater black ink nest. If there really is a mother nest, as you call it in this world, then it can only be in the source domain." Marshall Peak, Chapter 5391, You Trust the Word of a Woman? In the Black Ink Clan, hierarchy was extremely strict in all things. The higher-ranking black ink nests birthed the lower-ranking ones, and there was a one-way symbiotic relationship between them. If the humans had some suspicions about this, then Black Ink Clan themselves naturally had them too. However, Ji Chen, an acquired territory lord, had never come in contact with the mother nest, thus, he really knew nothing about it. Furthermore, the mother nest was a term that was coined by the human race. Even if it did exist, who knew what the Black Ink Clan called it? Those innate territory lords, such as Che Kong, may know more about these matters because they themselves were bred directly from the high-rank black ink nests. Thus, they had a connection to the source domain where the mother nest was suspected to exist. It was a pity that Che Kong was already dead, otherwise, there was still a chance to find out something from him. Now, Yang Kai understood why some of the territory lords were so much more powerful. Under normal circumstances, a territory lord's strength was less than that of an 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Master's. However, in every theater, there were always some exceptions. For example, Che Kong's strength was at least on par with an 8th Order Division commander. In fact, in a one-on-one fight, there were hardly any 8th Order Open Heaven Masters in the Great Evolution Army who were his match. Only Xiong Shan and a few other top elites could take him on. Che Kong was killed by Yang Kai primarily because he was too careless and allowed himself to be hit by a soul-rending thorn. Innate territory lords were directly spawned from high-rank black ink nests, so naturally, they were more powerful, but this method of birth likely exhausted their potential entirely, so they would never be able to become royal lords. On the contrary, Ji Chen, who was comparatively weaker, had room to grow and a chance of becoming a royal lord. Of course, it was still incredibly difficult for a Black Ink clan territory lord to advance to become a royal lord, no less so than for a human to reach the 9th Order Open Heaven realm. If this wasn't the case, there would be a lot more royal lords in the Black Ink clan after so many years, considering their innate advantage in numbers. There were surely a lot more innate territory lords such as Che Kong long ago, but after countless years of war with the humans, most of these innate territory lords must have died. Only a few survived. A rough estimate would say that before the latest war, the top 3 territory lords in all the theaters were innate territory lords. Now, tell me about the source domain. How much do you know? Old ancestor Xiao Xiao asked. Ji Chen was an acquired territory lord, so perhaps he did not know much about confidential information related to the Black Ink clan's origins. From the conversation so far, it appeared that the innate territory lords seemed to ostracize the acquired territory lords. However, they should know more than the humans. Ji Chen thought about it and said, "The source domain is something I only heard about from other territory lords. The source domain should be the source of the Black Ink clan." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao waited for a moment, but when he did not say anything else, she frowned and asked, "That's it?" Ji Chen said helplessly, "No." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao almost laughed. The source domain was the source of the Black Ink clan? That could be inferred from the name alone. Was there a need for him to state the obvious? The Black Ink clansmen who survived are all escaping in this direction. Could it be that you all are heading towards the source domain? I think so, Ji Chen nodded and said, "I don't know where the source domain is, but since I became a territory lord, I have become able to faintly sense something that I believe is the source domain. Thus, the source domain should be in this direction." It was because the source domain was in this direction that he fled this way. Only by fleeing this way could he hope to survive, but little did he expect that even as a territory lord, he would end up being trapped here. Yang Kai could not help but raise his brow. The Black Ink clan's situation was somewhat similar to his dragon source. On Dragon Clan's side, if an individual's dragon vein and dragon bloodline reached a certain degree of purity, they would be able to vaguely sense where Dragon Pool was, because the Dragon Pool was the origin of the Dragon Clan. Since the source domain was the source of the Black Ink clan, it was not surprising that Ji Chen would be able to sense it. If the source domain is the origin of Black Ink clan, there should be a lot of territory lords and also many royal lords there. Why don't they come out? What is preventing them from doing so? It was now certain that the 50 royal lords encountered in the Black Ink nest space previously were all from the source domain, or at least somewhere nearby, otherwise, there was no way to explain their origin. They appeared to be trapped in or around the source domain. Thus, even though the battles in the theaters were raging, they were indifferent to them. It was not that they did not care about the battles, but rather that they simply could not intervene. Ji Chen shook his head and said, "I don't know. You said that the royal lords came out of the source domain and brought their own Black Ink nests with them. How did they leave the source domain?" "I don't know. How far is this place from the source domain?" the old ancestor asked. "I don't know. What was your Black Ink clan fighting against in the olden days? How did this stretch of void behind the royal cities form?" This time after the old ancestor finished her question, she mercilessly warned, "If you dare to say you don't know, you will die." Ji Chen's expression became more and more bitter. He did not know the answers to these questions. Although he was a territory lord, he was just an acquired territory lord, and a low-ranked one in the Great Evolution Theatre at that. So, how could he know anything too confidential? Whatever Mo Jiao discussed with the innate territory lords was never shared with him. That was why he was willing to answer old ancestor Xiao Xiao's questions. For so many years, acquired territory lords like him had felt excluded from the core of the Black Ink clan. He knew very little about the inner workings of the clan, and he did not want to die unnecessarily. Although it is not clear, it should be related to you humans. The feud between the human race and the Black Ink clans goes back to ancient times. This void should be the original battlefield left behind by the human race masters during that war. This point was the same as what they had speculated. It was not surprising to think that the only ones in this world who could compete with the Black Ink clan was the human race. The divine spirit, although strong, were too small in number, so it was difficult for them to wage a war across such a wide battlefield. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao nodded and asked a few more questions, all of which were answered honestly by Ji Chen. Is there anything else you feel that you should tell us? Old ancestor Xiao Xiao finally asked. Ji Chen's expression suddenly tensed up, shook his head guiltily, and said, I don't know much. In that case, she turned her head to look at Yang Kai and said coldly, kill him. Ji Chen's expression changed dramatically as he protested, we had an agreement. You swore to let me go if I answer your questions truthfully. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao looked at him and asked mercilessly, you trust the word of a woman? She never planned to let Ji Chen go. Although a territory lord was not a threat to her, he must have killed many human soldiers over the years. How could she let an enemy like him live? Yang Kai grinned and extended his hand. Old ancestor indeed swore she would not kill you, but I never did. Space principles surged, stirring the void, and in a flash, countless void cracks appeared. They then surged towards Ji Chen as Yang Kai manipulated them. Ji Chen grit his teeth and rushed out with determination against the countless cracks. His black ink strength surging as he roared, you will die a horrible death. The void cracks sliced through him and black blood splattered everywhere. Just before the cracks hit Ji Chen, he managed to launch an intense blow towards Yang Kai, which hit him and flung him a distance back. By the time Yang Kai steadied himself, Ji Chen had already been sliced into countless pieces by the void cracks. Yang Kai looked at old ancestor Xiao Xiao and the 8th Order Division commander in disbelief and asked, you just stood there, watching? He thought that these two would act at the critical moment, which was why he did not defend himself at all. Due to their inaction, he almost suffered serious injuries. That 8th Order Open Heaven Realm master grinned and said, well, aren't you still fine? Wouldn't it be too late to ask if I wasn't? Yang Kai was indignant, but he knew in his heart that the old ancestor would ensure that he would not be hurt. Most likely, she did not intercede because she knew that the blow from Ji Chen would not hurt him. The source domain, the old ancestor murmured, it seems that there is a reason why there is only one high-rank black ink nest in each theatre. Yang Kai shook off the pain he felt, pondered a little, and understood what old ancestor meant. Ji Chen said earlier that the original royal lords who came out of the source domain brought their black ink nests with them. The information they received from the other theatres showed that there was only one high-rank black ink nest in each royal city. Furthermore, there was only one royal city in each theatre, regardless of how many royal lords were present. Since the high-rank black ink nests were brought out from the source domain by the first royal lords, they must have been spawned by the mother nest. Thus, when a territory lord became a royal lord, they did not have their own black ink nest and could only share one with the previous royal lord. The limitations on the mother nest must be due to some restrictions placed on the Black Ink clan. The old ancestor looked off into the void and continued, otherwise, when they found themselves losing the battles in the theatres this time, the royal lords at the mother nest should have come out to offer support. That restriction is most likely the other party had helped us get out of the trap the last time we were there. However, this restriction was clearly not complete, or perhaps, there was some interference which made it incomplete. Otherwise, the royal lords could not have taken black ink nests out of the source domain. Was there a higher realm of martial Dao above the 9th Order? At that time, old ancestor Xiao Xiao and others saw the big jade hand coming from the outside of the black ink nest space, which tore open a crack for them to escape through. Although there could be some other reason, there was no denying that the power of that hand was immense. The jade-white hand gave them a feeling as if it had surpassed the might of the Ninth Order Open Heaven realm, and at the same time, it seemed that it had not. It was extremely odd. What happened during ancient times? What secrets were hidden at the birthplace of the Black Ink clan? No one knew, so no one could give them an answer. However, the crusade by the human race continued. Although the road ahead was still dangerous, as long as the human race could destroy the source domain, there was a chance to completely solve the issue called the Black Ink clan. Nonetheless, it was a long way to go. What Ji Chen said should not be taken at face value. Don't trust this information too much. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao warned. Although Ji Chen seemed to be very cooperative, who knew what he really thought? They could not verify any of the information he provided, whether it was true or false. Furthermore, some of the information he gave could easily be figured out by the humans, so it wasn't all that useful. His words had to be taken with a pinch of salt. Some might be true while others, false. It would be foolish to believe him verbatim. The Eighth Order Open Heaven Realm Master nodded and said, "Yes. Continue to scout out the road ahead," old ancestor Xiao Xiao ordered, turned around, and returned to Great Evolution Pass. Yang Kai nodded lightly to the Eighth Order Open Heaven Realm Master before flying back to Dawning Light. He did not say anything more to Feng Ying and the others, but the urgency in his heart became increasingly obvious. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5392, The distance is shortening. All the theaters and the great passes set off from the royal cities without a clear goal, but today, they had a destination. The Source Domain. The Source Domain was the source of the Black Ink clan, where the mother nest was, along with a gathering of many royal lords. Not only were there royal lords, there must be many territory lords and soldiers as well. Furthermore, there were not just acquired territory lords like Ji Chen, many of the territory lords there were probably innate territory lords. The Great Evolution Army now had less than 30,000 soldiers, 45 Eighth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, and 1 Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Master. Such an army was considerable in size and strength. The other Great Passes likely had fewer forces than Great Evolution Pass, but there were 106 of them on this crusade. When all the armies converge into one, by then, the human army would exceed 2 million. This was a full 2 million masters at or above the Fifth Order. It was also the heritage accumulated over the ages by the cave heavens and paradises. Such a force was extremely powerful, but could it defeat the Black Ink clan in the Source Domain? Yang Kai was not sure, and neither were the old ancestors. Even though the human race was strong now, who could guarantee that they would win this battle? What if they lost? Also, what was the power that limited the Black Ink clan in the Source Domain? Who did that jade white hand that old ancestor Xiao Xiao and the others saw previously belong to? Would this unknown force aid them in battle? The road ahead was full of uncertainty, but they had to forge ahead. The Great Evolution Army continued to march forward. The reconnaissance squads were always out front to check the situation. Inevitably, they encountered a lot of dangers and unintentionally triggered many restrictions which caused them to suffer some casualties. Even Dawn, led by Yang Kai, nearly met its demise. Fortunately, old ancestor Xiao Xiao had arrived in time to save them at the critical moment. The deeper they went, the more dangerous the void became. Yang Kai wondered if Ji Chen could have returned to the Source Domain safely even if they had let him go. He might if he was lucky, however, he was likely to encounter a lot of dangerous traps along the way. Considering that even after countless years, the leftovers from the ancient war were still so dangerous, it was hard to imagine what kind of violent clashes had taken place in ancient days. As time passed, years had gone by. It had now been a full 3 years since the crusade to the Source Domain began. The road was fraught with dangers, but there was still no sign of the Source Domain. This made some wonder if they were going in the wrong direction. However, with more than 100 armies continuing to march forward, sweeping across such a vast swath of the void, there was bound to be one of them who was advancing directly at the Source Domain. All the great passes kept in touch with each other regularly. However, many great passes would occasionally lose contact because of the chaotic energy in the void. Fortunately, communications were always restored after a while. There were no enemies along the way, though the hidden arrays and residual divine abilities still made the void treacherous. One day, Yang Kai was exploring the hidden dangers ahead when he suddenly sensed something unusual. When he focused his senses on it though, he found nothing. A short while later, he flashed back to dawning light and greeted Fengying, "Stand guard for me." Fengying nodded her head and acknowledged Yang Kai's words. Yang Kai then formed a set of hand seals, causing his world force to undulate as a mysterious grand array suddenly appeared under his feet. The troops aboard Dawn were puzzled, not knowing why Yang Kai had activated the universe transference law. The universe transference law allowed one to teleport across vast distances to a universe array. Ever since Yang Kai installed universe arrays in the purifying black ink battleships, many soldiers had begun using the universe transference law to save their lives during the battle with the Black Ink clan. However, Yang Kai rarely used the universe transference law because he was proficient in the Tao of space, making him faster than any territory lord or Eighth Order master. The only ones he could not escape from on his own were the royal lords. Although Dawn was scouting ahead of Great Evolution Pass, they were not far from each other. If Yang Kai wanted to return to Great Evolution Pass, he could just travel there on his own using instantaneous movement and did not need to activate the universe transference law. The members of Dawn were puzzled, but Yang Kai appeared truly shocked. He was following a hunch just now, but did not expect to find anything. He did not intend to return to Great Evolution Pass, but wanted to use the universe transference law to investigate something else. The universe arrays in all the purifying black ink battleships were personally arranged by Yang Kai, thus, his imprint was left on every single purifying black ink battleship. As long as the distance allowed, he could travel to any purifying black ink battleship with the universe transference law. Others could only return to the purifying black ink battleships they had left their imprints on. At this moment, Yang Kai could sense the location of all the closest purifying black ink battleships with the universe transference law, but apart from the 4 ships around Great Evolution Pass, he was able to faintly sense 4 more to his left, and another 4 to the right. There were now 12 purifying black ink battleships within range of the universe transference law. Of course, there were many more, in extremely distant locations, which all felt so faint that even Yang Kai could not reach them. However, he could clearly perceive the 12 ships closest to him were within the range he could teleport to. This was a very abnormal situation. The distance between each great pass was at least a year's journey for the average warship. When the Great Evolution East-West Army set off from Wind and Cloud Pass, it indeed took them a year to reach Great Evolution Pass. A year's travel by warship was much too far for even someone skilled in the Tao of space like Yang Kai to cross using the universe transference law. However, he could now. What did this mean? It meant that the distance between the great passes had shortened to the point where he could use the universe transference law. How could this have happened? Yang Kai was at a loss, so he hurriedly dispersed the universe transference law and shot towards the pass, yelling from afar, "Continue to explore the path ahead." Soon, Yang Kai arrived at the middle of Great Evolution Pass where old ancestor Xiao Xiao sat with her legs crossed. Opening her eyes, she looked up at him curiously and asked, "What happened?" Over the past 3 years, Yang Kai had been out leading Dawn to scout the road ahead, never once returning to Great Evolution Pass until today. Yang Kai quickly explained, "We are getting closer to Wind and Cloud Pass and Azure Void Pass. We're now just 3 months away by warship." The 2 great passes closest to Great Evolution Pass were Wind and Cloud Pass and Azure Void Pass. Yang Kai could sense the other 8 purifying black ink battleships that belonged to these 2 great passes were now a 3-month journey away, which was the extreme limit that he could traverse via the universe transference law. Ordinary 7th Order masters could not travel such a large distance using the universe transference law. Not to mention a 3-month journey, even a single month's distance would undoubtedly be fatal for them, as transferring that far was basically the limit of an 8th Order master via the universe transference law. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao was stunned by what he said and asked, "How can you tell?" Yang Kai explained what he had just experienced. She pondered deeply for a moment before saying, "Come with me." Dashing off, the two of them quickly arrived at the hyperspace array. The Seventh Order Open Heaven Master, who was guarding this place, saw Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao and rushed to greet her. Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao waved her hand and asked, "Is there anything unusual on this side of the space array?" The Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Master did not know what the Old Ancestor was referring to and replied honestly, "There is nothing unusual. Nothing has changed from before." The Seventh Order thought about it and replied, "If we talk about changes, I am not sure if it's anything noteworthy, but recently, when we sent out some jade slips to the other great passes, the energy required seemed to have decreased, but the reduction was not obvious. It was because the reduction in consumption was not obvious that he did not report it. After all, the transmission of a jade slip did not consume much energy in the first place, much unlike the transfer of a cultivator, which required an enormous amount of resources." When Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao heard his response, she immediately determined that what Yang Kai said was likely true. Other great passes may not have detected anything yet, but with Yang Kai's unique circumstances, he was able to notice this anomaly. Great Evolution Pass was indeed getting closer to Azure Void Pass and Wind and Cloud Pass, much closer in fact. The distance between the great passes was originally about a year's journey, however, they were now just 3 months apart. This resulted in the reduced consumption for the transmission of jade slips through the space arrays. "Activate the array," Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao ordered. Whether the distance was truly shortened, they would know once they tried it. That Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Master hastily told his many co-workers and they began to work. "Head to Wind and Cloud Pass," Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao said to Yang Kai, who nodded and replied, "Understood." Soon after, the grand array was ready. Wind and Cloud Pass was set as the target destination, and Yang Kai stepped onto the space array. The array buzzed, and when the light dissipated, Yang Kai was gone. After Yang Kai disappeared, several Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Masters immediately checked the consumption of energy and were all flabbergasted. "How does it compare to before?" Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao asked. Yang Kai had been to Wind and Cloud Pass before through the hyperspace array. Since those assigned to watch and operate the space array had been here for years, they should know the usual consumption required. The Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Master replied, "The consumption is much less than before, less than 30% of the last time." The ones on duty here were thoroughly shocked. The consumption required to teleport through the hyperspace array increased according to distance, thus, teleportation was only done between neighboring great passes. If the destination was too far, they would have to transit through several great passes to arrive there, as that was the most economical method. Now, the consumption of teleportation was less than 30% of the last time. Since Yang Kai's strength had not changed significantly, and the hyperspace array had not been enhanced, the only factor that could be different was the distance between the destinations. Was the distance between Great Evolution Pass and Wind and Cloud Pass getting shorter? This thought came to the Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Master's mind. Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao narrowed her eyes slightly. It seemed that what Yang Kai said was true. Although she also did not doubt him, what happened before her eyes served as firm proof of his words. Great Evolution Pass was only just 3 months away from Wind and Cloud Pass now. Why was this? All the great passes were advancing in tandem towards the depths of the black ink battlefield, so logically speaking, the distance separating them should not change much. Now, however, they were somehow approaching one another. This was true for Great Evolution Pass and Wind and Cloud Pass, as well as Azure Void Pass, so what about the other great passes? Were they all getting closer? If that was true, then in time, more than 100 great passes would converge in one place. What was the mysterious place that they were converging to? Was it the source domain of the Black Ink clan? Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao's expression changed a bit. The distances between the great passes were getting shorter, which was actually good news for the human race. The Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Master had considered that if any great passes found the Black Ink clan source domain, the other great passes would have to rush over to support them. However, if they all gathered in one place, at the same time, it would save them a lot of trouble. When the human race gathered all their might, they were confident they could decimate even the Black Ink clan's source domain, no matter how powerful it was. Meanwhile, Yang Kai appeared above Wind and Cloud Pass Space Array. The Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Master there was an old acquaintance and was surprised to see Yang Kai, so he asked, "Brother Yang, why are you here? Is there some urgent information from the Great Evolution Army?" These days, there was basically no direct interaction between the Great Passes. All information was passed in the form of jade slips. For Yang Kai to suddenly appear in person, something important must have happened. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5393, Old Ancestor sets out. There's nothing urgent. This is just an experiment, Yang Kai said. He then turned his head towards the space array that had not completely closed and disappeared. The few Open Heaven Realm Masters were bewildered. Did someone teleport here? Wind and Cloud Pass Eastern Army Commander, Yuan Xingji, stepped into the hall and asked. He obviously noticed the commotion and came over to check the situation, however, he was a step too late. The Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Master on guard duty rushed forward to report. Yang Kai from Great Evolution Pass just came by, but went back almost immediately. He said that he was conducting an experiment. An experiment? Yuan Xingji frowned and barked. What is he trying to do? Each time a teleportation was conducted, it required a large amount of resources. Though the Great Passes were no longer starved for resources now, they should not waste them in such a manner. When the Grand Array lit up once again, the fluctuations generated were much subtler than before, thus, everyone knew that it was a jade slip rather than a person being sent. Sure enough, when the glow waned, a jade slip was lying quietly on the hyperspace array. The Seventh Order Open Heaven Realm Master went forward to pick up the jade slip and injected his divine sense, his expression soon changing as he frantically said, "Sir, Great Evolution Pass has discovered something." As he said so, he offered the jade slip to the army commander. Yuan Xingji took it, and after checking it out, his expression also changed. Great Evolution Pass and Wind and Cloud Pass are now only 3 months apart. This was very surprising news. How could there be only a 3 months journey separating them? The jade slip that was transmitted from Great Evolution Pass also speculated that not only had the distance between Great Evolution Pass and Wind and Cloud Pass been reduced, the distances between all other Great Passes had also been shortened. The jade slip instructed them to spread the news and at the same time seek confirmation of this. Yuan Xingji did not dare to delay. He quickly continued to spread the word while arranging men to go to the neighboring Great Passes through the space arrays. In less than half a day, jade slips from all the Great Passes were collected in Great Evolution Pass's space array hall. Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao checked the jade slips before tossing them to Yang Kai, nodding at him as she said, "It's confirmed. The distances between all the Great Passes have shrunk." Yang Kai took a look at the messages, frowned, and asked, "What is causing this?" Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao shook her head and said, "I don't know. Whatever the case, it means that all the human Great Passes will eventually converge in one place. This was a good thing for the human race. If all the Great Passes gathered in one place, then their power would not be scattered and they would not need to fight separately as before. With more than 2 million Open Heaven Realm Masters, more than 100 Ninth Order Old Ancestors and thousands of 8th Order Masters, such a force would be enough to take on any enemy. Even if the source domain was really that dangerous, the human army could still overcome it. You have an advantage in your ability to sense the purifying black ink battleships. Pay more attention to the position of the other Great Passes purifying black ink battleships and judge the distances between them." Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao instructed. Yes. As they ventured deeper into Void, they not only encountered remnants of war between the Ancients and the Black Ink clan, but also a number of vivid celestial phenomenon, naturally formed by the universe itself. Each of the celestial phenomenon was extremely magnificent, occupying massive regions of the void, hiding unimaginable dangers beneath their beautiful appearances. Even the Ninth Order Old Ancestors could feel a sense of danger coming from these celestial phenomenon, making them aware that falling into them would be disastrous. According to Feng Ying, there were many similar celestial phenomenon in the 3,000 worlds during ancient times. However, as the number of human race masters increased and their activities became more frequent, the celestial phenomenon in the 3,000 worlds gradually faded away. However, in the depths of the black ink battlefield, these celestial phenomenon remained unchanged throughout the ages. Technically speaking, the chaotic dead territory was also a type of celestial phenomenon. However, it was not naturally formed but rather the result of the collision of Big Brother Huang and Big Sister Lan's powers. The chaotic dead territory was so dangerous that even the 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters could not enter for long. Only the 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters could move about for a short period in such a place. Yang Kai had experienced the dangers of the chaotic dead territory firsthand. If giant spirit god Ara had not protected him at that time, he would never have survived. Many of the celestial phenomena in the depths of the black ink battlefield felt even more dangerous than the chaotic dead territory. The celestial phenomena were so dangerous that even Great Evolution Pass needed to go around them. A year later, Wind and Cloud Pass and Azure Void Pass were now less than a month's journey away from Great Evolution Pass, and this distance continued to shrink. This was the same for all the other Great Passes as well, with the two furthest Great Passes now only 2 months apart. If this persisted, the Great Passes would converge in another year's time. Even though Yang Kai was scouting ahead of the army, he could clearly sense the tense atmosphere within Great Evolution Pass. The Great Evolution Army had begun to sharpen its swords. Although there were no clear orders to do so, almost everyone had felt that when the great army of the human race gathered, it would be the time to fight to the death with the Black Ink clan. Furthermore, the human race had always anticipated this battle. 6 months later, Great Evolution Pass and Wind and Cloud Pass were only 10 days apart from each other. If this was an ordinary stretch of void, Yang Kai would already be able to see Wind and Cloud Pass. However, the energy in the depths of the black ink battlefield was too violent and chaotic. There were countless restrictions and dangers all over the place. Thus, even though he knew where Wind and Cloud Pass was and how far it was from him, he still could not see it clearly. He could only vaguely see that there was a huge object off in that direction. The great passes were about to converge. On this day, Yang Kai was looking towards Wind and Cloud Pass when he suddenly felt something and turned his head to look in that direction. The next moment, Feng Ying, who was beside him, also sensed something and followed his gaze. There was nothing as far as the eye could see, but there was definitely something different about the energy fluctuations in the void. "Is someone fighting?" Feng Ying asked gruffly. Yang Kai silently perceived for a moment, before shaking his head and saying, "Something must have triggered some massive restriction. The shockwaves of a battle would not be this violent." Although he also did not know what happened in that direction, it was certain that the place where the disturbance occurred was extremely far from them, at least 2 months' journey by warship. At such a distance, even if a 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Master and a Royal Lord fought, they could not possibly create such a huge disturbance. The only explanation was the triggering of some massive array. Previously, Great Evolution Pass also accidentally triggered such a huge restriction, and the impact was so intense that the pass shields were almost torn apart. As they were talking, a surge of power suddenly came from inside Great Evolution Pass, followed by a pillar of light that shot out into the void. Yang Kai turned his head to look and frowned. "The old ancestor has set out," Feng Ying shouted. What just happened was obviously the old ancestor teleporting through the space array. An 8th Order Division commander would not create such a disturbance during teleportation. Only the teleportation of an old ancestor could consume such a huge amount of energy and create such violent space principle fluctuations. "She has gone out." Yang Kai did not know where the old ancestor went, but since something had alerted her, it was obviously something extraordinary. When Yang Kai turned his head to look, he vaguely caught a glimpse of a lofty and huge figure, covering the sky and tearing through the void. The next moment, there was a familiar aura from Wind and Cloud Pass, enveloping Great Evolution Pass. It was the aura of Wind and Cloud Pass Old Ancestor. Additionally, on the other side, there was also the aura of Azure Void Pass Old Ancestor. The aura of the two old ancestors intertwined in the sky above Great Evolution Pass, turning into a protective layer. Yang Kai immediately understood. Since Great Evolution Pass Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao had left, that meant that there was no old ancestor in the pass to ensure its safety. The pass would not be able to protect itself if it encountered a huge danger. Therefore, the old ancestors of the passes to the left and right immediately joined forces to shelter Great Evolution Pass. This way, if there was any danger, these two old ancestors could respond immediately. In other words, now the two old ancestors have joined hands to protect Azure Void Pass, Wind and Cloud Pass, and Great Evolution Pass. Yang Kai was now clearly concerned. A short while later, a more violent aftershock came from the direction where the anomaly was first detected. Yang Kai's brow twitched. If it was just a single disturbance, a huge restriction being triggered would make sense, but with repeated fluctuations occurring, it could only be due to a huge fight. Two top masters fighting would not create such intense fallout. It would take at least 10 or 20 such powerhouses to create a disturbance of such magnitude. When Yang Kai thought about how old ancestor Xiao Xiao rushed out just now, he immediately understood that there must be several old ancestors fighting with some strong enemies in that direction. The only ones who could compete with the old ancestors were the royal lords. It must be the royal lords who had escaped from the theaters several years ago. A lot of royal lords died when the royal cities of each theater fell, but there were quite a few who escaped as well. It was not that the old ancestors did not want to kill them, but rather that they couldn't as long as the royal lords were determined to escape. Those royal lords that fled that day all went towards the depths of the black ink battlefield. Yang Kai had been thinking about this since he found out that the great passes were converging and would eventually meet up at some point. If the great passes converged, then what about the royal lords who escaped from the other theaters? Would they converge in one place as well? There wasn't just one or two royal lords, but dozens. If all those royal lords joined forces to target a single great pass, that great pass would be able to resist. It would soon be destroyed, along with all the human soldiers inside. He had mentioned this previously with old ancestor Xiao Xiao, however, she just told him that preparations had been made. Thus, Yang Kai did not ask any more questions. After all, he was only a 7th Order master and should just focus on what he could do, rather than things he had no ability to interfere with. Now, it seemed that the old ancestors did have an arrangement for such a situation. From looking at what just happened. When there was movement nearby, old ancestor Xiao Xiao was the first to go provide support, while the old ancestors of Wind and Cloud Pass and Azure Void Pass quickly took Great Evolution Pass into their protection. This was the safest arrangement. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao was definitely not the only old ancestor who had set out. There were dozens of royal lords, so many 9th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters would have to be deployed to face them. Perhaps some old ancestors would fall in this battle, but the royal lords would surely suffer even more. At that moment, a strange fluctuation appeared from another direction. Yang Kai frowned and quickly looked in that direction. The royal lords had split up their forces. They did not all converge in one place, but instead divided into two groups to attack the human great passes in two locations. However, were their attacks going to be limited to only two locations? After all, with dozens of royal lords, they could attack at multiple places at the same time without any difficulty. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5394, Deadly Flaws. If Yang Kai was in the position of the royal lords, he would also divide his forces to hit the humans before the great passes fully converged. What he was concerned about turned out to be reality as the Black Ink clan did exactly what he feared. "Brother, I'll leave this to you," said the old ancestor of Azure Void Pass. The next moment, his aura faded and a pillar of light shot up into the sky from Azure Void Pass. The Azure Void Pass old ancestor also went to support the second great pass that was attacked by the royal lords. The void trembled and the sky shook from an oxy's bellow as a master's aura approached rapidly. Yang Kai turned his head and saw the Wind and Cloud old ancestor, riding a mighty bull, charging over from the direction of Wind and Cloud Pass. Great Evolution Pass was in the center, Wind and Cloud Pass on the right, and Azure Void Pass on the left. Now that old ancestors of Great Evolution Pass and Azure Void Pass have left, the old ancestor of Wind and Cloud Pass had to shelter the three great passes all on his own. Thus, it was only natural that he came to Great Evolution Pass so that he could be positioned at the center and monitor the left and right passes. "Greetings, old ancestor." Yang Kai and the members of Dawn saluted. The Wind and Cloud Pass Old Ancestor did not go to Great Evolution Pass directly and instead landed on Dawning Light. The Wind and Cloud Pass Old Ancestor nodded lightly, smiled at young Kai, and said, "Well done." He was referring to the battle at the Royal City a few years ago. Young Kai, as a 7th Order Master, killed a Territory Lord and a 9th Order Black Ink disciple. This must have been the only achievement of its kind in the entire history of the Black Ink battlefield. Normally, the old ancestors did not take much note of those in the 7th Order, however, young Kai had drawn his attention. "It was a fluke, old ancestor," young Kai said modestly. The Wind and Cloud Pass Old Ancestor chuckled and said, "With your abilities, if you can reach the 9th Order, you should be more useful than us old guys." What a pity. Unfortunately, young Kai's advancement to the open heaven realm started at the 5th Order, and then he took a mid-rank world fruit, which raised his innate limit, but only to the 8th Order. An 8th Order open heaven realm master was strong, but still not comparable to a 9th Order master. Of course, if we can find the universe furnace, we should be able to help you break through those shackles. Young Kai appeared gloomy as he replied, "This junior is only a 7th Order master now. It is too early to think about trying to reach the 9th Order. Furthermore, if we can completely solve the problem of the Black Ink clan, then what does it matter if I am an 8th Order master or a 9th Order master in the future?" The old ancestor raised an eyebrow when he heard young Kai's response and remarked, "You're a sensible one." He then raised his eyes, looked to the distance, and said solemnly, "I hope that will be the case. If this time, they really could completely eradicate the Black Ink clan, then whether young Kai was a 7th Order or 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Master, it would not matter. Likewise for the others such as the old ancestors. They had been on the Black Ink battlefield for so many years, but if they really could return to the 3,000 worlds, they would no longer need to cultivate and could just play with their descendants and enjoy a comfortable life. The war had lasted far too long, so the old ancestors were all eager for such peaceful days. Following his gaze, young Kai asked, "Old ancestor, is the situation dire?" Old ancestor laughed lightly and said, "They're just courting death." On hearing him say that, young Kai suddenly felt much better. He then raised his eyebrows and asked, had the old ancestors anticipated this? Not really, it was just a precaution. After all, so many royal lords escaped and such a force could not be taken lightly. The old ancestor casually replied, "We can't find them if they hide, but since they chose to attack, we must capitalize on the opportunity to kill them. It's better for us that the enemy is out in the open rather than hiding in the dark. But now that the royal lords are splitting their forces between several places, it will be difficult for the humans to deal with them, no?" The old ancestor slowly shook his head. "They divided their troops, but so can we. Didn't Xiao Yuya, your Great Evolution Pass and Azure Void Pass old ancestors go to support the fight?" Xiao Yuya? Young Kai raised his brow as he realized that he had heard something unbelievable. And, the Black Ink clan is ultimately different from the human race. They are indeed rather strong and have caused problems for us humans when they defended their respective high-rank Black Ink nests. However, they have a very obvious disadvantage. "Do you know what it is?" Young Kai pondered for a moment and said, "They have to use their Black Ink nests to heal their wounds." The Wind and Cloud Pass old ancestor smiled and said, "Correct. That is their biggest flaw, a fatal one if you will. The Black Ink clan's very survival is based on their Black Ink nests, so they are nothing without them. Although these royal lords escaped previously, all of them are seriously wounded in the process, and without Black Ink nests, they would not have been able to recover from their injuries in just a few years." Young Kai's eyes lit up as he listened and his worries eased significantly. He had forgotten about this. The reason why Mo Jiao had not been able to recover from his injuries over the past few hundred years was because old ancestor Xiao Xiao had been harassing him. Occasionally, she would use space beacons to teleport to the outskirts of the royal city to threaten him. When that happened, how could Mo Jiao have the time to fall asleep inside his Black Ink nest to heal? Mo Jiao had no way to recover, so he had to drag his injuries out until the final battle, when his Black Ink nest was destroyed and he was killed by old ancestor Xiao Xiao. That was the case for Mo Jiao, and now the other royal lords would suffer similar fates. Although those royal lords escaped from the other theaters with their lives, They did not have black ink nests to enter, retreat and heal, therefore, they were like Mo Jiao, unable to recover from their wounds. Moreover, they fled all the way to this place, passing by many dangers along the way. If they were lucky extremely, their journey may have been smooth, but you have experienced the hidden dangers in this region of the void. We relied on the protection of the great passes to remain safe, but those royal lords had to travel alone. Many of them must have suffered additional injuries along the way. The Wind and Cloud Pass old ancestor patted the head of the bull he was riding and joked, these royal lords would be lucky to have 70% of their strength remaining. 70%. It still seemed like a lot, but it was significantly lower than their peak, and unlike the royal lords who had no way to heal, the old ancestors were different. When the old ancestors were wounded, they might take a few decades of recuperation to heal, but they would eventually recover from their injuries as long as they were given enough time and resources. So, if they didn't reveal themselves, we old folks would have to constantly remain on guard against them. Since they are out attacking us though, it can be considered a good thing. We can kill them now, and it should not be difficult to do so. Now it only depends on how many we can eliminate. The Wind and Cloud Pass old ancestor slightly narrowed his eyes and continued, however, the fact that they chose to attack us here meant that we are not far from the source domain. They certainly don't want us to get close too, so even if they know that they can't win, they still have to fight hard. Young Kai asked, what about those royal lords in that black ink nest space? If they also intervene? It's possible, but highly unlikely. Old ancestor mused, from all the information we've gathered, those royal lords in the black ink nest space should be under some kind of restriction with no way for them to easily move their true bodies. They were able to ambush our Ninth Order masters in that black ink nest space only because they had the help of the black ink nest's power. However, nothing is certain. After all, we do not know anything about the situation in the source domain. Whether those royal lords will intervene or not, we will find out soon enough. Of course, they would know when the final battle began. Things would not bode well for the humans if those royal lords that appeared in the black ink nest space could intervene in this battle. Thus, the result of this battle would directly verify the humans' previous speculations. It was always torturous to have to wait. The after-effects of the fight in the void seemed to be increasingly violent, and even from a long distance, the fallout was clearly transmitted to them. Yang Kai could not tell who had the upper hand. Then, a strange fluctuation radiated towards them. The Wind and Cloud Pass old ancestor raised his eyebrows, smiled, and said, there. A royal lord has fallen. The fluctuation was due to the death of a royal lord. Those aboard Dawn all punched their fists in the air and cheered in celebration. Yang Kai also heaved a long sigh and began to relax. A royal lord had fallen, which meant that the human race had the upper hand. It looked like the royal lords that appeared in the black ink nest space really had not moved, otherwise, a royal lord could not have been killed so quickly. After the first royal lord fell, the humans seemed to gain momentum and soon the royal lords were killed one after another. The battle continued, and the energy disturbances became increasingly violent. The number of fallen royal lords was increasing, and the energy fluctuations were getting progressively more intense. The royal lords who had escaped from the theaters were now fighting to the death. It was not until several days later that the commotion in the distance suddenly subsided. Yang Kai and the others all looked at the Wind and Cloud old ancestor. Although they already had a guess in their hearts, since the old ancestor did not give a conclusive answer, they remained unsure. The old ancestor obviously noticed their gazes and smiled. This was a huge victory. A huge victory. Cheers erupted aboard Dawning Light. At the same time, there was also a loud cheer from Great Evolution Pass. Apparently, the Inner Sanctum had also found out about the results of the battle. Yang Kai and the others were extremely excited, but there was a hint of doubt in the Wind and Cloud old Pass ancestor's smile. He had sensed that in the battlefield, all the royal lords' auras had withered. In other words, all the royal lords he could sense had fallen. This was not normal. In the past, when these royal lords could not defeat the Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, they still had the sense to escape. Why had they not attempted to flee this time? As for whether or not they could escape, they could still at least try. Although not personally involved in this battle, Wind and Cloud Pass Old Ancestors' investigation found out that all those royal lords fought bravely to the bitter end. Not only did none of them try to escape, they went all out right from the beginning, not seeming to care about their own lives. That was why the energy fluctuations were so intense. These royal lords wanted to destroy a great pass, but even after noticing the response of the human race, they still did not back down. The Wind and Cloud Pass Old Ancestor sensed that in the two battlefields, a total of 11 royal lords fell. 5 in one and 6 at the other. Under normal circumstances, a great pass could not withstand a combined attack from 5 or 6 royal lords. However, the human race was prepared. The moment the battle broke out, the nearby old ancestors all raced over to provide support. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5395, Weakened Dangers. At the beginning, there were some losses at the two great passes targeted by the royal lords. However, when the other old ancestors rushed over to provide support, the royal lords could no longer attack with impunity. The Wind and Cloud Pass Old Ancestor could only sense 2 battlefields, but there could be farther battlefields that even he was unable to detect, as there were enough royal lords for them to split into more than 2 groups. If 11 royal lords fell at these 2 battlefields, then what happened to the royal lords at the other battlefields? Did they succumb as well? Could they not escape? Why did they not escape? The Wind and Cloud Pass Old Ancestor squinted slightly and pondered. That was when Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao returned. Now that the distance between the great passes had become much shorter than before, even for a supreme master like an old ancestor, the consumption of resources to use the space array had been greatly reduced. Thus, Wind and Cloud Pass Old Ancestor did not stay. Immediately after Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao's return, he left in style, returning to Wind and Cloud Pass. Inside the main conference hall, Old Ancestor Xiao Xiao's aura was slightly weakened. Although she did not suffer serious injuries in the last confrontation, there was always a price to pay for killing several royal lords. It was also fortunate that those royal lords were heavily injured to begin with and had greatly diminished strength. Otherwise, a winner of this battle might not have been determined so quickly. Xiong Shan reported gloomily, a total of 4 great passes were attacked by the royal lords. Azure Nether Pass, Purple Jade Pass, Exquisite Pass, and Constellation Pass. A total of 21 royal lords were killed in the 4 battles. The royal lords' attacks were launched almost simultaneously. The 2 battlefields that the Wind and Cloud Pass Old Ancestor felt before were the ones at Azure Nether Pass and Constellation Pass. Exquisite Pass and Purple Jade Pass were a little further away, so the old ancestor was unable to monitor them. These 4 great passes each encountered an attack by 5 or 6 royal lords. A total of 21 royal lords had fallen in a battle, with none escaping in the end. The results of this battle were more than just significant. These were 21 royal lords. Not territory lords nor feudal lords. Previously, the total number of royal lords in the entire Black Ink battlefield numbered slightly more than 100 before the pacification of the major theaters killed about half of them. Of those survivors, 21 were now dead, which meant that there were not many royal lords left alive from the theaters. However, many were apprehensive about this victory and some were even a little frightened. Most of the soldiers were unclear about the situation, only thinking that the old ancestors were indeed powerful, managing to kill 21 royal lords outside the 4 great passes. However, those old ancestors who participated in that battle felt differently. Those royal lords. None of them ever even considered retreating. They seemed to be on a suicide mission. When Exquisite Pass was attacked, its old ancestor was the first to go out to face the enemy. It was 1 versus 5, so in less than 10 breaths of time, he was nearly killed by those 5 royal lords. Under normal circumstances, even though the Exquisite Pass Old Ancestor was facing 5 royal lords, he would not be at risk of falling that quickly. It was because of this that he went confidently to fight against them. However, the 5 royal lords seemed completely prepared to sacrifice themselves if they could take their enemy down with them. It only took a moment of inattention for the Exquisite Pass Old Ancestor to nearly lose his life. It was only thanks to the timely arrival of the old ancestors from the other passes that he managed to turn the tables around. A royal lord even cast a sacrificial secret technique upon his death and almost succeeded in dragging an old ancestor down with him. In that battle, 21 royal lords were ruthlessly killed, while many old ancestors were injured. I'm afraid the source domain is not far away, old ancestor Xiao Xiao quickly said, coming to the same conclusion as wind and cloud pass old ancestor. It was because the source domain was not far away that those royal lords fought so hard to stop the humans' armies from advancing. They also knew that they could not stop every pass, so they had divided into several groups and attacked at different locations. Their intention was clearly to inflict as much damage as possible. However, they did not expect that the humans were prepared or that their response would be so rapid, thus, their plans failed. Xiong Shan frowned and said, according to the information we collected before, there were 45 royal lords who had managed to escape the initial war. With 21 killed, there are still 24 remaining. There is no way to know where they are hiding or what they are planning to do. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao nodded. Those royal lords are a grave hidden danger. No matter what their plans are, we can only stop them when they choose to appear. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao also carried this strong sense of unease. According to the number of royal lords who originally escaped, they could have allocated 5 royal lords to attack 9 great passes at once. However, only 21 royal lords showed up to attack 4 great passes. The remaining 24 royal lords were nowhere to be seen while those who did appear all died. Where were those missing royal lords? It would be good if they had emerged to fight like the other royal lords, but now that they were hiding, it became a huge problem for the humans. No matter where those royal lords are hiding, Great Evolution Pass need not feel dispirited about it. Send out orders for the reconnaissance squads to return. The reconnaissance squads of the 4 great passes that were attacked earlier were all nearly wiped out, so old ancestor Xiao Xiao was also afraid that if something like this happened again, the squad's Great Evolution Pass sent to scout the way would not be able to resist and be annihilated. Xiong Shan was about to issue the orders when a long, sharp whistle suddenly came from outside Great Evolution Pass. Xiong Shan was stunned and turned his head towards the source of the sound. This was obviously a signal from a squad doing reconnaissance. When he turned around again, old ancestor Xiao Xiao had already disappeared, rushing out the moment she heard the sound. Xiong Shan frowned and hastily tried to catch up with her. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao swiftly appeared aboard Dawning Light but found no trace of the enemy, so she couldn't help frowning and asking, "What's going on?" Yang Kai replied, "Old ancestor, there is something wrong with the road ahead." Old ancestor Xiao Xiao narrowed her eyes slightly and investigated the situation for a moment before her expression changed. There was indeed something wrong with the road ahead. All this time, the deeper they traveled into the void, the more dangers they encountered. There were arrays and divine abilities left from the ancient era everywhere, along with various celestial phenomenon. However, up ahead, all the dangers seemed to suddenly reduce significantly. The reduction was very obvious, with there being practically no sense of crisis from anywhere. In fact, even 7th Order Open Heaven Masters no longer felt threatened. Before this, even the 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters could not take the dangers in the void lightly. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao frowned, looked into the situation, and found that it was indeed as Yang Kai said. "When did you first notice?" Old ancestor Xiao Xiao asked. Such an obvious change was really a bit unusual, as there might be some different hidden dangers ahead if they went down this path. Yang Kai replied, "Just now." Nothing seemed off when the old ancestors and royal lords were fighting. However, Yang Kai suddenly noticed a change in the void soon after that battle ended. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao frowned as she was not sure why there was such a change. She had planned to recall the squads back to Great Evolution Pass to avoid them being attacked by the hidden royal lords. However, now she could not recall them anymore. So, instead of going back to Great Evolution Pass, she remained on Dawning Light to personally monitor the frontline situation. If a royal lord did attack, she would be able to immediately protect the scouting squads from this position. With a flash of her divine sense, she sent a message to Xiong Shan back in Great Evolution Pass instructing him to ask the other great passes how their situations were. Soon, it was reported that almost all the great passes had encountered such changes and the dangers of the road ahead had been significantly reduced. At the same moment, Deep in the void at an unknown place, there was a violent surge of black ink strength. The energy rampage involved 24 figures, each possessing a strong aura. These 24 figures were the surviving royal lords who had previously escaped from the theaters. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao was worried that these unseen royal lords were hiding in the shadows, preparing to ambush the great passes. However, the truth was they had long returned to this unknown land. The other 21 who did not come back here were mainly trying to delay the advance of the human race. The original 21 royal lords' strength was strong, as even if they were wounded, they were still royal lords. They split into 4 teams, and as long as they were fast enough, they had a good chance of destroying a few great passes. They did not need to inflict widespread damage. Even if they destroyed 1 or 2 great passes, the humans would have their momentum blunted and be forced to delay their follow-up actions while focusing on defense. However, the humans were prepared for this possibility, so the Black Ink clan's plan failed. The 21 royal lords were all killed, while the human race's crusade was not affected in any way. Of course, these 24 royal lords had no way to perceive the fall of their companions nor any time to worry about them, as they had their own mission. At this moment, these royal lords had gathered together in a certain place and were each using their own means and black ink strength to bombard a certain place in the void. When 24 royal lords made a move together, they could unleash a fearsome power that was enough to shake the heavens and earth. At the place where their raging attacks struck, a skinny figure that was basically just dried up flesh and bones Saturday. This figure had no aura and to any outside observer was as good as dead. Only his eyes remained bright and full of life. He was Kang. His location was not hidden in any way, so anyone who could reach this place would be able to find him as long as they were determined enough. The 24 royal lords were currently attacking him. However, the fierce attacks, which was enough to tear apart space itself, failed to even injure Kang in the slightest. All the attacks were stopped by an inexplicable energy field just 1 step away from Kang. This energy field seemed to be a kind of restriction that resisted all outside interference and simply distributed all impacts out across an enormous area. Although the royal lords had been attacking for a long time, they showed no signs of giving up, but there was also no hint of progress being made. Meanwhile, surrounding Kang, there was now rich black ink strength that filled the void. Though the royal lords were attacking, Kang did not consider it to be a crisis. It was as if he was certain that these royal lords could not do anything to him. Not only did he not try to stop them, he even tried to chat with them. "Did you guys come back from out there? Look what a mess you are in. Were you beaten up before you came running here?" Seems to be the case. All of you are quite injured. Must have been a significant defeat. Ian, the current generation have finally made their mark. Looks like this old master has not wasted his effort in sitting here for so many years. Can you tell me about the situation outside? I've been here for so many years and I don't know anything about the outside world. What's more, there's no one to talk to here. Hey, don't be like your great aunt. She was like a boring bottle gourd or a woman. Even when beaten, she never made a sound. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5396, Who else is there to fool but you? Hey, seriously? What is the situation in the outside world today? You lowlifes have actually been driven back all the way here? Has my human race flourished so much that you are no longer their match? There are not many innate royal lords anymore, Chem. Most of you are acquired and have advanced from below. It looks like a lot of those who went out from here died already. Look, don't waste your energy. Do you think that this old master will be easy for you to defeat? Save your energy and take a break. Isn't it better for us to have a chat? Hello. Hey you, yes, the one with the horns on your head. Yes, you, tell me how things are out there. In exchange, I can give you a gift. The black ink strength surged as they madly attacked. However, even with the combined efforts of 24 royal lords, they couldn't even scratch Kang. The more he nagged, the fiercer the royal lords attacked. It was as if they were determined to shut him up. At one point, a voice from the dark depths exclaimed in surprise, "You can control Sha's power? The power to devour?" Although Kang's movements were extremely subtle, They were still detectable, so he usually concealed them extremely well. However, this time, he accidentally revealed something. Kang laughed and said, "Oh, you've found out." The voice said coldly, "So that's why. Old thing, no wonder you survived for so many years. You can control Sh's power." Kang sighed and said, "Not like I can help it. This damned place has been turned into a soulless, spiritless land by your underlings, so if this old master wants to live, the only way is to secretly steal from you from time to time." For countless years, he had relied on the manipulation of Sh's power to occasionally devour some energy from the darkness in order to survive, otherwise, he would have died many years ago. The voice in the darkness sneered and said, "You're really good at hiding. You managed to hide your flaws for so many years that even I was unaware of it. It was unbecoming of me to keep it from you, the master of this domain. Now that you've found out, should I be ashamed of it? I'm afraid that you've forgotten how Sh died. I can't help it. This is the only way if I want to live." How could Kang not know how Sh died? It was because Sh had devoured too much black ink strength and was at risk of being corrupted by it that he had to integrate himself into the restriction at the last moment. Even an existence as powerful as him could not completely resist the corruption of black ink strength. The voice in the darkness laughed coldly and said, "Very well, you want it, don't you? If you want it so badly, then I'll give it to you." As the voice spoke, the calm darkness suddenly rumbled. It was as if there was a violent energy surging in it, boiling from the inner depths and impacting the invisible restriction. Kang frowned and called out hastily, "Mo, do not be rash. Let's talk about this." The voice in the darkness kept silent and the power rumbled more and more fiercely. Kang was originally withered to skin and bones, but now, he visibly swelled up. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a plump old man. This transformation was not done though, as his body continued to expand and soon bulged up, like a blown-up ball. "Stop, stop!" Kang shouted, appearing terrified as he yelled, "Mo, stop, if you keep doing this old master will burst." Mo naturally would not stop. He wanted nothing more than to make this noisy old man explode. The 24 royal lords saw this scene from outside the restriction and smiled happily. They felt reinvigorated, and increased the intensity of their attacks. After a few moments, Kang's whole body was swollen into a ball. He was so puffed up that no one could see his facial features. He seemed like he could burst at any moment. He shouted with difficulty, I can't hold on anymore." After he said so, he lifted his chubby palm and thrusted it forward. The royal lords, who were bombarding him indiscriminately, instantly froze as if death itself had enveloped them. In the darkness, Mo suddenly roared, "Dodge!" But it was too late. When Kang thrust his fat palm out, the vast void trembled and the restriction which covered the darkness visibly rippled. The 5 closest royal lords were swept up by the violent burst of power and instantly exploded into blood mist. More royal lords behind them were hit hard and began to bleed. The whole world suddenly fell silent with just one blow. Kang's swollen body, which was like a round ball, now began to deflate and shrink rapidly. He eventually reverted to an old man, heaved a long sigh of relief, and said, much more comfortable." The royal lords, who were still alive, were all terrified as they stared at Kang with immense fear. They were royal lords, the most powerful in existence in this world. 24 of them joined hands to attack Kang for so long, but they couldn't even hurt him. However, with just one counterattack, 5 royal lords perished and more than 10 of them were seriously injured. The ones who weren't further injured were simply lucky to have avoided the blow. The power of that palm just now had surpassed their understanding. There should not be such a force in this world. In the darkness sealed by the restriction, the black ink-colored ocean no longer had ripples on it. A while later, Mo angrily scolded, "You tricked me." Just now, when Kang pleaded for him to stop, he really thought that this old thing was about to burst, so he spared no effort to funnel more power into him. In reality, Kang was borrowing his power to fight. Thus, once Kang unleashed the accumulated power, it violently blasted out, resulting in casualties among the royal lords. It could be said that the power of that blow was not his real strength, but his combined with Mo's. The royal lords were unaware of what happened, but Mo understood. He knew that Kang's attack was done with the help of his power and also the power of the entire restriction. That was why the damage it inflicted was so terrifying. It was impossible for Kang to do this with his strength alone. If he really had such strength, he would not have been trapped here so close to the restriction for so long. How dare you lie to me? Mo roared hysterically, as if he was a jilted woman. Kang shuddered a little as his body was covered in goosebumps. Settle down, Mo, don't make frivolous accusations as if this old master has taken advantage of you. Furthermore, isn't it expected that I would fool you? You're such an idiot and deserve to be fooled. You lied to me back then too. Mo hissed, you led me here, and laid this restriction, imprisoning me for millions of years. You all deserve to die. Kang sighed slightly and said, it really couldn't be helped, Mo. Your power is just too overbearing. If you weren't imprisoned here, the 3,000 worlds would have been destroyed long ago. Haven't we old guys been accompanying you? Now, there is only one old man left, while everyone else is dead. Mo coldly laughed, there's no way for you to live any longer. It was a huge restriction that required someone to be here to make sure Mo remained trapped. Thus, those Kang mentioned had to remain here at all times. Unfortunately, Mo's life and no natural end, while those people who guarded this place were not immortals. Regardless of how strong they were, they would eventually pass away. So be it, the past is the past, let's not mention it anymore. Kang waved his hand with a look of despair and continued, this old master will not last long. When this old master dies, you will no longer be trapped. Then whatever you do in this vast universe is none of my concern. There was a long silence in the darkness before Mo muttered, I await that day. Kang raised his eyebrows and asked, do you want to do it yourself? Just like earlier, perhaps if we do it a few more times, this old master will really burst. Me. Mo coldly snorted, fell silent, and ignored him. Kang looked at the 19 royal lords who were still alive, waved to them casually, and asked, shall we continue? The royal lords looked terrified and none of them dared to move. Since they knew that this man could devour black ink strength and turn it into his own power, why would they still want to fight against him? They just witnessed him vaporize 5 royal lords with a simple thrust of his palm. If he did it a few more times, they would all die meaninglessly. The next moment, the royal lords seemed to have received some instructions. All of them bowed towards the darkness where Mo was sealed, turned around, and dashed off. Soon, they were nowhere to be seen. Kang secretly heaved a sigh of relief at this sight. Although Mo's intelligence had grown considerably compared to back then, and he was much more mature, making it not as easy to deal with him, he was still rather naive. If he really pumped up Kang a few more times with his power, Kang was certain that he would not be able to survive. After all, there were originally 10 guardians of this huge restriction. However, he was now the only one remaining. He could still make use of the restriction, but he was now all alone. He sighed in his heart as he looked in the direction of where the royal lords departed. Sure, if you do not return soon, this old master really won't be able to hold up much longer. Will I be able to last until that day? He had guarded this place for so many eons, in this barren place with no means of restoring his strength or increasing his lifespan. One by one, his old friends exhausted their powers and died. Before they died, all of them integrated themselves into the restriction to reinforce it. The last one to leave was She. Before integrating his body into the restriction, She told Kang a plan that he would retain a trace of his soul, which would cross the void, and return to the 3,000 worlds. Doing so, he might have a chance to live again. He wanted to find a complete solution to the problem in his next life. Needless to say, this was an extremely bold plan, because even She, himself, did not know whether it would work. But there was always hope. Now, more than 100,000 years had passed, yet She still had not returned. Kang did not know whether his plan had worked or not. Perhaps She's soul never made it back to the 3,000 worlds. After all, the road was very dangerous, with plenty of traps. An empty spirituality did not have the slightest self-preservation power and might be destroyed if it encountered any dangers. Even if She managed to return to the 3,000 worlds, there was very little chance that he could resurrect. Kang was mentally prepared for this. The reason why he agreed to this plan was also because there was really no other way. A sliver of hope was better than sitting on the sidelines and waiting to die. However, after waiting for so many years, Sh's plan must have failed, otherwise, he should have heard something from him in these 100,000 years. The good thing was, now the descendants of the human race had finally struck back. They actually were able to drive back the royal lords from the outside, allowing Kang to see a glimmer of hope again. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5397, Spiritless Land. However, Kang was trapped here and unable to move. There was no way for him to provide any help to the human race. Now, he could only wait. The 19 royal lords who left earlier were obviously moving to intercept the humans. In this regard, Kang was not worried. Since the human race could drive them back, then they would not have any problems dealing with these remnants. The real problem now was how to handle Mo. This was the source of all the problems. Without resolving him, all other efforts were ultimately futile. When they discovered this problem millions of years ago, they also tried to eliminate Mo. Unfortunately, they failed and could only create a cage here to seal Mo inside. For millions of years, Mo could not get out of this trap. It was as much of an imprisonment for them as it was for Mo. Kang gazed far away, hoping that this generation of humans could give him a pleasant surprise. In the void, both young Kai and old ancestor Xiao Xiao had an ominous feeling as they stood on Dawning Light's deck. It had been a month since the royal lords attacked and the void ahead had changed dramatically. The further they went, the fewer dangers they encountered. Then, at a certain point, young Kai suddenly felt as if Dawning Light had entered a different world, one without a trace of energy at all. So far, although the void had been vast and seemed both silent and empty, the fact was it was still filled with all kinds of energy. It was just a matter of how much. The most common energy in the void was the various starlight strengths. The 9 heavenly layers grand array that was placed in Voidland was able to draw in starlight strength to replenish itself. Thus, as time passed, the more powerful the 9 heavenly layers of grand array would become. The black ink battlefield also had starlight strength, as well as many other strange powers in it. Although these powers could not be absorbed by humans directly, they were real, and many mobile palace artifacts and warships had the ability to draw on such energies to power themselves. This way, the reliance on cultivators to power warships was reduced. It could be said that these kinds of chaotic powers filled all of space in the void. However, this place was a complete vacuum. There were no restrictions, no residual divine abilities, no colorful and diverse celestial phenomenon, not even the power of the void itself. This was a place where there was literally nothing, only endless space. Being in such a place, one could not help but feel surreal. Even being in it, young Kai could not help but wonder if there really was such a place in this world. A spiritless land. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao murmured and frowned slightly. Young Kai had previously heard of spiritless lands, however, this was the first time he had actually seen one. Is it man-made or naturally formed? Young Kai asked. The old ancestor shook her head, I don't know. It was fine if it was naturally formed, but if it was artificially created, then it was a big deal. Does this place have anything to do with the Black Ink clan's source domain? Is the source domain hidden here? But, if this is a spiritless land, why would the source domain be hidden here? Was this done by the great experts of ancient times for some reason? Nothing was known. At that moment, an energy fluctuation flickered from the depths of the void. Although it was fleeting, both young Kai and old ancestor Xiao Xiao sensed it. Young Kai immediately turned his head to look in that direction while old ancestor Xiao Xiao frowned and narrowed her eyes. Not only did they sense it, all humans in the Great Passes sensed it. Be it 9th Order old ancestors or 5th Order soldiers, all clearly sensed that energy fluctuation. In all the Great Passes, all eyes and divine senses focused in that direction. Some even rose into the sky hoping to get a better look. Strong. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao exclaimed softly. Although the place where the fluctuation came from was still incredibly far away, she clearly perceived that whatever caused it was so powerful that she could not hope to replicate it. In other words, the one who caused this fluctuation was a master beyond her. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao could not help but feel intimidated. She was instantly reminded of the jade white hand that she saw in the black ink nest space previously. At that time, she sensed that the master of that hand seemed to be more powerful than a Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm masters. With a single strike, he actually managed to tear apart the black ink nest space, which had sealed 22 Ninth Order's Open Heaven Realm masters and 50 royal lords inside of it. This showed that the Jade White Hand's master and the mother nest were very close to each other, and that the master who attacked had unfathomable strength. Was the intense energy fluctuation made by the owner of that Jade White Hand? If not, who is this master that is fighting in the depths of the void? This crusade was increasingly puzzling and incomprehensible. After a month passed, the distances between the Great Passes had become extremely close to each other. Wind and Cloud Pass and Azure Void Pass were now just an hour or so away from Great Evolution Pass. In fact, Yang Kai could clearly see the two Great Passes on his left and right. It could also be said that the human race had effectively become a single army. Any one of the Great Passes could support the other Great Passes in a timely manner. The power of more than 100 Great Passes had gathered. There were more than 100 Ninth Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, thousands of 8th Order Open Heaven Realm Masters, and around 2 million soldiers. Furthermore, they had the accumulated heritage of the cave heavens and paradises, over hundreds of thousands of years. With such a powerful force, the human race had the confidence to deal with the Black Ink clan, regardless of how strong its hidden forces were. In this battle, the Black Ink clan would be eradicated once and for all. After the energy fluctuation, there was no more movement from the depths of the void, and it remained unknown what caused it. 3 days later, while old ancestor Xiao Xiao was meditating aboard dawning light, she suddenly opened her eyes, gazed ahead momentarily and then dashed out. A long continuous whistling sound followed. At the same time, from a number of Great Passes, Ninth Order Open Heaven Masters flew out like long bolts of lightning towards the depths of the void. Enemy attack! Yang Kai shouted, "Take your stations." He clearly perceived that as many as 30 old ancestors had rushed out from the Great Passes. The only enemy who could make so many old ancestors move was the Royal Lords. Last time, 21 Royal Lords divided their 4 groups to launch an attack which eventually resulted in their annihilation. Not much time had passed since then, but now another wave of Royal Lords was attacking. These had to be the Royal Lords who did not show themselves previously. Yang Kai wondered why they did not attack together and instead split into 2 separate waves. Were they not aware that splitting their forces and attacking at different times would be less effective? That couldn't be. There had to be some reason why they had to do so. After all, the Royal Lords were not fools. Shortly after Yang Kai shouted, a battle broke out in the depths of the void ahead, a very fierce battle. Previously, when old ancestor Xiao Xiao went to another Great Pass to support them, the distance was too far for Yang Kai and the others to perceive anything. However, this time it was different. The location of this battle was not far from Great Evolution Pass, about half a day's journey by warship. Divine abilities and secret techniques began to erupt, and extremely dazzling and gorgeous lights bloomed at that distant location. Underneath that glorious glow was nothing but violence and death. The battle was extremely ferocious. This was the rawest feeling this battle gave to Yang Kai. There were no probing attacks or measuring of the enemy, just an immediate life or death struggle. 1, 2, 3. Yang Kai concentrated on perceiving the battlefield ahead, and after a moment, he frowned and mumbled, "The number isn't right. There are only 19 Royal Lords." A total of 45 Royal Lords escaped after the pacification of the theaters. 21 died in their attack on the Great Passes. Then there should still be 24 Royal Lords remaining. So, why were there only 19 in this battle? Where did the other 5 go? Feng Ying also nodded and said, "It's 19. Yang Kai immediately ordered, "Return to Great Evolution Pass." There were still 5 missing Royal Lords, and no one knew where they were hiding. If they attacked Dawn at this moment, they would not be able to resist. The old ancestors from Azure Void Pass and Wind and Cloud Pass next to them might not be able to rescue them in time, thus, it was better for them to return to the Great Pass. Naturally, there was no way for Yang Kai to know this was unnecessary. After all, Those 5 royal lords were killed by Kang before this, and there were only 19 royal lords left. What's more, these 19 were far more seriously injured compared to the previous 21 royal lords. Kang may have only killed 5 royal lords, but he seriously injured more than 10 of them as well. As a result, these 19 royal lords were in worse condition than the previous 21 who had attacked, with many of them not even able to display 50% of their peak strength. 30 old ancestors went out to fight them, outnumbering them almost 2 to 1. This battle broke out suddenly, and ended very quickly. Yang Kai was just leading Dawn back to Great Evolution Pass when the battlefield in the distance was filled with the sounds of royal lords falling, one after another. On the city walls, the human soldiers who sensed the battlefield were dumbfounded. No one expected the royal lords to die so quickly. The battle was actually over before a stick of incense passed, with the auras of all 19 royal lords that had appeared withering as they perished. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao soon returned, without a trace of injury. Xiong Shan and the others rushed to welcome her. Not rejoicing in victory, the old ancestor wore a frown on her face. After all, the previous battle had given her an extremely odd feeling, even more so than the one before it. It was as if these royal lords did not take their own lives seriously. They appeared as if they could not wait to die and practically did not defend themselves, showing no sense of self-preservation and only attacking wildly. What concerned her more was that the 19 royal lords that appeared this time were very seriously injured. More than 10 of them could not even exert half of their usual strength, otherwise, the old ancestors could not have won so easily even if they were numerically superior. The royal lord's injuries were odd, and she wondered if that immense burst of energy some time ago had something to do with it. Perhaps that was the case, otherwise it could not be explained. If so, that would mean that someone had struck those royal lords before them. As the old ancestor pondered, a vague guidance suddenly came to her from the darkness. It was not a word, nor a divine sense transmission, but a simple guidance. Old ancestor Xiao Xiao immediately turned her head in the direction where the royal lords came from. In that instance, the eyes of more than 100 old ancestors from the various great passes also converged in that direction. Some of their brows rose slightly, some looked surprised, while others appeared relieved. When that guidance came, all the old ancestors knew that they were close to reaching the Black Ink clan's source domain, and would soon be able to clear some of their doubts and questions. Be it whether the jade white hand that saved them that day belonged to a friend or a foe would be revealed soon. If they were not mistaken, the vague guidance in the darkness came from the owner of that jade white hand. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5398, You've finally come. More than 10 days after the 19 attacking royal lords were killed, the great passes finally arrived at the source of darkness. The void deep ahead was enveloped by a huge and dense cloud of black ink strength that appeared like an endless ocean that had existed since time immemorial. Although everything was calm, everyone felt the dread of what was to come. Even from a distance, it still gave people an extremely ominous feeling. The evil energy in this black ink ocean seemed to be able to devour one's heart and soul just by staring at it. In the great passes, all eyes gazed towards the black ink ocean, and all of them looked grave, even the old ancestors. Was this the Black Ink clan's source domain? Although no one told them what it was, when they saw the Black Ink ocean, they all realized that this was definitely the source domain, and that the mother nest must be inside. At the beginning of the crusade, no one thought that the source domain was so far away, and no one expected that the source domain would look like this. If too many Black Ink clansmen died in a certain battlefield, the black ink strength would form thick black ink clouds, and if enough black ink clouds came together, they were sometimes called black ink oceans, but those were a far cry from the sight before them. This was a real black ink ocean, dense and boundless. The so-called black ink oceans that they had seen previously were at most small ponds by comparison. Most of the humans only focused on this vast black ink ocean ahead of them, while the old ancestors of the great passes vaguely perceived that there seemed to be something else beyond this black ink ocean. It was something that was hidden extremely well, and no one would know it was there unless effort was made to sense it. In Myriad Demons Pass, the old ancestor used his demon eye of annihilation to see through the illusion. At Divine Feather Pass, The divine feather old ancestor activated his true vision eye to pierce the veil of the void. It was the same for the old ancestors of other great passes. With their ninth order open heaven realm cultivation, they more or less all practiced some form of eye secret technique, though their attainments varied quite a bit. At this moment, when the various eye secret techniques were activated, the hidden objects beyond the darkness were instantly perceived by the old ancestors, and what they saw left all of them pale with shock. They saw a restriction at the outer edge of the darkness, which was like a cage that enveloped the entire black ink ocean. It was because of this seal, which imprisoned the black ink ocean, that it did not spread outward. It was not hard to imagine that without this seal, the black ink ocean would have been so enormous that perhaps the whole void would have been filled with it, leaving no place for the human race to exist. It was a huge revelation. Such a seal was definitely not a natural formation and had to be man-made, but even the old ancestors had never heard of anything like it. From the traces left by the passage of time, it was obvious that this seal was ancient. In fact, it was so old that even the old ancestors could not figure out when it was even formed. However, the old ancestors did not need to investigate for long as suddenly, something in the void attracted their attention. There was an old man with a white beard, sitting on the restriction, looking at them with a smile. All the old ancestors gasped. Initially, they did not even notice this man's presence. This old man seemed to suddenly appear out of nowhere. With more than 100 old ancestors scanning the area, it was naturally impossible that he could be missed. However, the old man could not possibly had just appeared there. He had always been there, but they did not know what technique he used such that even they, the old ancestors, could not detect him. In other words, if he did not want to be found, none of the humans here could find him. This old man was very strong. So strong that even the old ancestors were shaken. He just sat there with a smile on his face, yet the old ancestors all felt that he was facing them individually. This was a strange feeling, but also a sign of his supreme strength and control. They did not detect any energy fluctuations from the old man, yet, many ninth order open heaven realm masters had a clear understanding of the situation. It was clear to them that he had no ill will towards the human race. Additionally, the old man was obviously human. Without coordinating, each of the old ancestors stepped out from the great passes and converged towards the old man's location. Although they were fairly certain this old man helped some of them escape from the black ink nest space, they remained cautious as they still had not confirmed his origins or intentions. With more than 100 ninth order open heaven realm masters acting together, the old man would have to consider carefully if he had any malicious intent. When the old man detected the ninth order open heaven realm master's thoughts, his smile only widened. Then suddenly, the old man appeared disappointed and frowned. As the old ancestors approached from the great passes, he clearly saw Duan's handiwork from the great passes. Back then, one of his comrades, Duan, was supremely talented in artifact refining, second to none in it. In fact, the cage where Mo was imprisoned was created by Duan with the help of the 9 others. Of course, Duan died after he created this cage, along with all the others except him. It was naturally impossible for Duan to have personally built these great passes. However, Kang remembered that Duan had taken a few disciples during his life and passed down his knowledge to them. Thus, it seemed that the great pass was created by Duan's disciples. But rather than that, what Kang was disappointed about was that he could not find the familiar aura he was searching for among these people. That could only mean that Sh's plan had failed. He must have failed to cross the void and return to the 3,000 worlds, otherwise, he surely would have come here today. Aboard all of the great passes, all were confused when they saw the old ancestors walking towards the darkness. The old ancestors were able to see Kang's figure only because Kang willingly allowed them to see him, but not the others. Only Yang Kai stood on the walls of Great Evolution Pass and stared at them with wide eyes. He appeared shocked as if he had seen a ghost in the daytime. There's someone here. There's actually someone in this accursed place. He had heard from old ancestor Xiao Xiao that there was a force fighting against the Black Ink clan, and she even speculated that the force was near the mother nest. However, he still could not believe it until he really saw this old man. This was a spiritless land, at the deepest part of the Black Ink battlefield. It was where the source domain of Black Ink Clan. As far as Yang Kai knew, for the past several 100,000 years, no human had ever set foot in this place, but there was actually someone here. Did this mean that this person had been here for at least hundreds of thousands of years? In the absence of the presence of any energy, how did he survive? Even if this old man was extremely strong, he must have depleted all his reserves after so many years. Could it be that this old man's small universe was like his own? One that could raise living beings, allowing him to be self-sufficient? While Yang Kai was stunned, so was Kang. After noticing another gaze upon him, Kang turned to look towards the source and found a little 7th Order junior staring at him. Those in the 9th Order Open Heaven realm could see him because he took the initiative to reveal himself to them, but he did not allow anyone else to see him. Even the top 8th Order Masters at the Great Passes were confused as they did not know where all the old ancestors were going, so what was so special about this 7th Order boy? Kang's eyes flashed. Yang Kai immediately shuddered as he felt like he was being examined from the inside out. It was a very uncomfortable feeling that sent chills down his spine. Yang Kai frowned as he cursed to himself. Regardless of who this old man was, he should not pry into others' secrets. He felt that this old man was up to no good. On the other hand, Kang now understood why Yang Kai could see him. When he peered into Yang Kai's small universe, he saw a World Tree clone. Strictly speaking, Kang had a close relationship with the World Tree, and it was with the power of the World Tree clone that Yang Kai was able to sense the old man's existence even before the old ancestors. Kang did not bother with Yang Kai and just smiled at the 9th Order Masters who came to him and gathered in a semicircle. Unconcerned about their vigilance, he said with a mellow tone, "You've finally come. I've been waiting for this day for more than 1,000,000 years." On the wall, Yang Kai became curious and restless. Although he resented the old man for prying into his personal details, what was happening was clearly an opportunity to learn the secrets of the ages. The old man, who had lived here for hundreds of thousands of years, was a character from an era so ancient there were no records of it. He must know more about Black Ink Clan than any of the humans today. He could be revealing something about the secrets of the Black Ink Clan right now. Thus, Yang Kai also wanted to hear about it. However, he was not strong enough and he was unqualified to participate in such a discussion. Seemingly noticing something, Xiong Shan frowned and asked, "Brat, what's the situation over there? You look like an ant on a hot metal wok. What's happening?" Yang Kai said, "Sir, if you don't know what's going on, then how could I know what's happening over there?" He then continued, "Sir, why don't we utilize our divine sense to hear what the old ancestors are saying to that old sir?" When he said this, Xiong Shan, Mi Jing Lun, and all the others looked strangely at him. What old sir? There was no such thing as an old sir over there. They only saw the old ancestors of all the great passes leaving the passes in unison and converging in one place. Without orders from the old ancestors, they did not dare to do anything rash. None of them saw any old sir. Yang Kai said, "It's that old senior." He pointed his hand to where the old ancestors were gathered. Xiong Shan stared over there, but still could not see anything. He then slapped the back of Yang Kai's head and snarled, "What nonsense! How can there be anyone there other than the old ancestors?" Yang Kai fumed. Why did he have to slap my head? Could he not have just used his words? However, after seeing Mi Jing Lun and others' expressions, Yang Kai suddenly understood. "None of you can see him?" Xiong Shan growled, "If you keep talking nonsense, I will split your head in two." Yang Kai turned his head to look at Feng Ying and asked, "Senior sister, you also cannot see that old sir?" You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.